The silence was wrong. Harry Potter stood in what remained of the entrance hall and felt it pressing at him, heavy as water, filling his ears until even his own breathing sounded too loud. Hogwarts was supposed to be noisy, even at midnight, even in winter, even after curfew. The castle always had something to say, a portrait muttering, a stair groaning into motion, a ghost drifting through stone with a sigh like a page turning. Now, there was only dust, only the faint, reluctant creak of shattered beams settling into new, broken shapes. Only the occasional clatter of rubble, nudged by unseen house elves, trying to make the impossible look like work that could be finished. 3 days since Voldemort fell. 3 days since the screaming stopped. Harry had slept in scraps, the kind you didn't remember when you woke. 6 hours in total, maybe. A conjured bed in the room of requirement, when it bothered to appear, because it was one of the only places still standing that didn't feel like a corridor waiting to collapse. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them. Remus and Tonks, side by side on the great hall floor, as if they had simply sat down to rest and never stood again. Fred, caught in the cruelest moment of all, the half-second before a laugh becomes sound. Colin Creevey, too small among the others, his name joining the list of 50, until the number felt less like counting and more like a curse that settled on Harry's skin. He moved as if through a dream, crossing cracked flagstones toward the marble staircase. His hand kept drifting to his wand, like a nervous habit he couldn't break. The Elder Wand was where it belonged, sealed away with Dumbledore's dead and all the things Harry wished he could put behind him. But Holly and Phoenix Feather was still in his pocket, familiar, solid, real. Behind him, footsteps crisp even in exhaustion. Mr. Potter, Professor McGonagall, Headmistress McGonagall now, he reminded himself, because the world insisted on changing even when his mind refused to follow, descended the stairs with careful precision. Whole sections of banister were missing, leaving gaps like teeth knocked out in a fight. Her robes were immaculate, because of course they were, but her face betrayed the same sleeplessness that sat under Harry's eyes like bruises. "The minister is here," she said quietly, "and Miss Granger. They're waiting in my office, what's left of it." Harry nodded, because speaking felt dangerous. If he spoke, something might crack. They climbed, step by step, through the wound of the castle. The stone gargoyle guarding the headmistress's staircase had a fracture running down its face, like a tear that would never dry, but it still swung aside at McGonagall's command. Some loyalty, it seemed, survived even rubble. The spiral staircase carried them up. Harry felt the shift in the air as they ascended. The office had always been a pocket of Hogwarts' heart, a place where the castle's magic gathered and listened. Now, it felt like a heart bruised, but still beating. Inside, a few portrait frames hung empty, their occupants off spreading news through the painted network that connected magical Britain. Dumbledore's portrait remained, seated with a calm that made Harry want to shout at it and cling to it all at once. Those sharp blue eyes watched Harry enter, like they had been waiting. Kingsley Shacklebolt stood at the window, tall, broad-shouldered, silhouetted against morning light that filtered through glass someone had cleaned by magic out of sheer stubbornness. He looked like an Auror still, despite the ministerial badge he'd been forced to wear. The exhaustion in him was different from Harry's. Harry's exhaustion was grief and shock and too many nights with blood under his fingernails. Kingsley's was responsibility. Hermione sat before McGonagall's desk, parchment already stacked across her lap like she'd been doing this for hours. Her hair was messier than usual. Her eyes ringed dark, but her posture was stubbornly upright, as if she could hold the world together by refusing to slump. She looked up and offered a tired smile that tried very hard to be normal. "Harry, finally," she said. "Been busy," Harry replied, dropping into the chair beside her. His voice came out rougher than he meant. "Found a hidden passage in the dungeons. Someone had been living there. Death Eater, by the look of it. Long gone. That makes 4 bolt holes, Kingsley said, turning from the window. His voice was low, steady, and worn thin. 4 places they hid, waited, watched. Makes you wonder how many we haven't found. McGonagall settled behind her desk with a small, controlled exhale, as if letting herself show fatigue was a luxury she could only afford in private. The castle has more secrets than any of us know. Dumbledore himself said he never learned them all. Her gaze flicked, almost involuntarily, toward the portrait. Isn't that right, Albus? Dumbledore's painted form stirred. Quite right, Minerva. Hogwarts keeps her mysteries close, though I suspect she'll be more forthcoming with you. She always did prefer practical minds. Practical minds don't rebuild collapsed towers, McGonagall said crisply. But Harry heard the affection under it. He heard the way her voice softened on his first name when she wasn't thinking about it. She lifted her wand and summoned a tea service. The pot poured itself with a steady certainty that felt like defiance. The steam rose as if the world had not ended 3 days ago. Cups clinked gently, politely, like a normal morning. Hermione accepted hers with both hands, as if warmth could anchor her. I've been reviewing ministry structural records, she said, already halfway into the problem, because Hermione always moved toward solutions the way other people move toward air. The damage is extensive. We lost 8 department heads, 3 killed, 5 fled before they could be arrested. The Aurora office is down to 1/3 of its normal strength. And the Wizengamot, Kingsley finished, with an edge that made the word sound like something sharp, is a viper's nest. 17 members stood trial for collaboration. We convicted 9. The ones who remain aren't much better. They just hid their sympathies more carefully. Harry watched Kingsley as he spoke. Kingsley had been an Auror for 20 years. An Order member, someone Harry trusted the way you trusted solid ground. Now he wore power, like a coat that didn't fit yet. You'll need allies, Dumbledore's portrait said softly. Some will come from unexpected places. With respect, Albus, Kingsley said, and Harry heard the strain in the formality. I'm not sure this world has many allies left. The Muggle-born community is terrified. Half of them are still in hiding. Pure-blood families are either grieving their Death Eater relatives or quietly seething that their way of life is under threat. And the moderates, the ones who might help, are too frightened to speak. Then we make them less frightened, Hermione said, her voice firm, precise, like a spell spoken correctly. Harry recognized that tone. It meant she already had a plan with steps and contingencies and footnotes. We pass protective legislation. We prosecute the guilty publicly and fairly. We show them the ministry can function, that justice exists, that there's a future worth believing in. McGonagall's cup met its saucer with a soft click. And Hogwarts? She asked. The question didn't sound like administration. It sounded like a wound. Do we have a future to believe in here? The air shifted. Even the portraits felt quieter. Harry had been dreading this. He had spent the last 3 days walking the castle like a ghost that couldn't leave, counting the damage, because counting was easier than feeling. The astronomy tower collapsed into rubble, the hospital wing gutted by fire, corridors held together by emergency spells that would fail eventually, because everything failed eventually. The greenhouses destroyed, half the library burned or cursed, and that was only what he could see. The castle's magic is wounded, McGonagall said softly, as if speaking gently could keep it from breaking completely. The house elves report spells behaving strangely. Warming charms fail in certain rooms. The moving staircases freeze or shift without warning. The room of requirement, she paused, and the name itself seemed to hurt. Dobby's sacrifice, the fiend fire. It damaged something fundamental. The room appears and disappears at random now. Sometimes it shows places that shouldn't exist. The castle fought with us, Harry said, remembering stone warriors marching, suits of armor clanking into battle. Hogwarts had chosen a side. Hogwarts had bled. Maybe it needs time to heal. Like we do, time we may not have, Kingsley said. He withdrew a roll of parchment and spread it on the desk. The official seal of the Wizengamot glared up at them like a warning. This arrived this morning. 18 families have submitted petitions demanding Hogwarts remain closed for the next academic year. Safety concerns, structural integrity, psychological trauma. Harry let out a sound that was too bitter to be a laugh and too sharp to be a sigh. They want a year to hide, he said, to smooth it over, to let everyone forget what their children did when the Carrows were in charge. Which families? Hermione asked, already angry. Kingsley read down the list. Parkinson, Bulstrode, Selwyn, Knott, others, old names, old money, old rot. Hermione's quill scratched on parchment like it was carving into stone. They'll make it law, Kingsley said quietly. They have the votes. If Hogwarts doesn't reopen in September, McGonagall said, voice tightening, it sends a message that we're too broken to continue, that they won. Her eyes flashed, steel wrapped in grief. I will not allow it. Harry felt something in his chest respond to that, with a painful, stubborn spark. He didn't know if it was hope or defiance or simply exhaustion refusing to lie down. Hogwarts has survived 1,000 years, McGonagall continued. It has endured dark wizards and wars and political collapse. We will survive this. Hermione looked up. Do we have staff? McGonagall didn't hesitate, as if she'd been reciting the list to herself every time she tried to sleep. Flitwick stays for charms, Sprout for herbology. Once we rebuild the greenhouses. Hagrid for care of magical creatures, naturally. Potions. Her voice caught, only for a moment, but it was enough. We need a potions master. We need defense against the dark arts. We need transfiguration, because I will be occupied with administration. And we need a new Muggle studies professor. Charity Burbage's name sat unspoken between them like a body. We need everyone. McGonagall finished, as if the bluntness could blunt the pain. What about Slughorn? Harry asked. He came back for the battle. 1 more year, McGonagall said. He's agreed. But we need younger professors. People who can rebuild a department, not simply maintain it. Hermione's quill moved faster. We should reach out internationally, she said. Recruit abroad if we have to. And former students. People who understand what Hogwarts means now. Neville, Harry said suddenly, the name arriving like a light in fog. Neville Longbottom. He stood up to Voldemort when the rest of us were gone. He's brilliant at herbology. Sprout always said so. He could help rebuild and teach. McGonagall's expression softened, just slightly. Mr. Longbottom has proven himself. Then, sharply, because softness was dangerous, he is young. So was Snape, Harry said, and immediately wished he hadn't. McGonagall's gaze didn't flicker. So he was. The words came out flat. Very well. I will speak with Mr. Longbottom. She made a note. Her quill scratched like determination. And Miss Weasley, she added, to assist Madame Pomfrey. We will need extra medical staff if we are to reopen. Kingsley leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. For a moment, he looked like he might be any exhausted man, not a minister trying to hold a shattered country together with 2 hands and stubbornness. The ministry can provide emergency reconstruction funds, he said. I'll push it through before the Wizengamot can object. Call it national interest, because it bloody well is. A knock interrupted them. The door opened to Percy Weasley, pale and breathless, carrying more parchment like parchment. was the only thing keeping the world from falling apart. Minister, Percy said. Morning dispatches. Some are urgent. Kingsley took them, scanning the top sheet. Something hardened in his face. There's been an attack, he said. Harry's hand went to his wand before he even thought about it. A shop in Diagon Alley. Flourish and blots. Someone threw a cursed firebomb through the window last night. Hermione's cup froze halfway to her lips. What kind of curse? Dark, Kingsley said. Very dark. And there's more. He lifted another parchment. Anonymous letters sent to 7 Wizengamot members this morning. I won't repeat the exact wording. His gaze met Harry's, but the message is clear. The old ways will return. McGonagall's jaw tightened. Hermione's eyes sharpened. And Harry felt, with a sick, familiar certainty, the shape of what came next. Not peace. Not the quiet he'd been promised by death. War didn't end. It changed clothes. It learned new words. It moved from battlefields into corridors and letters and the spaces between laws. Kingsley spoke again, and his voice had the grim steadiness of someone naming a storm. They're regrouping. The ones who got away. The ones who stayed hidden. Not every supporter had a dark mark. Some were sympathizers, funders, quiet believers who never got their hands dirty. He exhaled slowly. They're still out there, watching, waiting. Harry stared at the parchments, at the ink that smelled faintly of ministry wards, and realized something that made the room tilt slightly around him. Voldemort was dead, but Voldemort's shadow had learned how to survive without him. Then we root them out, Harry said. His voice didn't sound like an 18-year-old boy who hadn't finished school. It sounded like someone who had buried too many friends to tolerate another list. Kingsley looked at him for a long moment, and Harry saw the decision forming behind his eyes like a door closing. I need you to understand what I'm about to ask, Kingsley said quietly. And Harry, somehow, already knew. Kingsley's gaze didn't leave Harry's face. Harry had seen that look before on commanders in the middle of a battle, when they'd decided what had to happen, even if it would break someone. It was the look of a man doing arithmetic with lives. I need you to understand what I'm about to ask, Kingsley repeated. And this time the words sounded heavier, like they carried a chain. The office seemed to narrow around them. The portraits held their breath. Even the tea steam curled more slowly. Harry felt his stomach sink. I want you to become head Auror, Kingsley said. Not in a few years. Not once you've trained properly. Not once you've had time to be anything else first. Now. Harry stared at him like the words were in a foreign language. I'm 18, he said, and the number sounded absurdly small in his own mouth. I didn't even finish Hogwarts. Kingsley didn't blink. You led an army. You coordinated a battle inside this castle. You made decisions under pressure that most grown men couldn't survive making. The auras we have left, they'll follow you. They already do. That's not, Harry began, but the sentence collapsed. There were too many ways it could be true, and too many ways it could go wrong. McGonagall spoke before Harry could find the right words. Her tone was controlled, but something in her eyes tightened with protective anger. Minister, she said, Mr. Potter has been through. I know, Kingsley said quietly, cutting her off with something close to apology. Merlin knows I know. But this isn't about what he deserves. It's about what Britain needs. Hermione's hands had gone still on her parchment. Her quill hovered, ink trembling at the tip. Ron wasn't there, but Harry could hear Ron's voice in his head anyway. Are you joking? You can't dump that on him. Harry swallowed. There's a reason Auror training takes years, he said. You don't make someone head Auror because he's famous. This isn't fame, Kingsley replied. This is trust. The word landed hard. Harry had wanted trust his whole life. Not the kind you got because people stared at you and whispered your name. Real trust. The kind that meant you mattered as a person, not as a symbol. Now it felt like a stone being placed in his hands. I'll assign you a senior auror as advisor, Kingsley continued. Gawain Robard survived the war. Barely. He can handle technical procedure, while you provide leadership. It's not ideal. Nothing is. Harry's mind raced, trying to find a door out of the room. What about you just appointing someone else, he asked. Someone older. Someone who's compromised, Kingsley said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I have auras who were imperious, auras who lost family, auras who are exhausted and frightened and angry. I have senior officials I don't trust. I have a wizened gamut that's already sharpening knives. I need a person in that office I can rely on not to be bribed, not to be threatened, not to be quietly turned. Because they already tried, Hermione said softly, and Harry realized she'd been thinking the same thing he had. They'll try again. Harry looked at Dumbledore's portrait without meaning to. The portrait met his eyes and held them, not commanding, not pleading, just watching, as if saying, choices, Harry, always choices. And you've never been allowed the easy ones. McGonagall set her cup down, the sound sharp in the quiet. Mr. Potter, she said, I won't pretend to advise you on ministry matters. But I will say this, do not say yes out of guilt. Do not say yes because you believe you must bleed forever to earn what you survived. Her voice softened slightly. Choose for the right reasons. Harry closed his eyes. For a moment he was back in the forest, walking to Voldemort's camp to die. He'd been tired then too, tired in his bones. But he'd walked anyway because he couldn't see another way. He opened his eyes and looked at Kingsley. You're asking me to become a weapon, he said quietly. Kingsley's jaw tightened. I'm asking you to become a shield. Harry didn't know which was worse. Hermione's chair scraped. She stood abruptly, as if motion could keep her from drowning in the weight of it all. If you do it, she said, voice clipped and practical in the way she got when emotion threatened to overwhelm her, you won't do it alone. Harry looked at her. Hermione, I'm serious, she said. The Aura office is bleeding. The ministry is bleeding. We need structure, legal compliance, accountability. If you're head Auror, you need someone whose entire job is to tell you when you're about to do something that violates everything we're trying to rebuild. Kingsley's eyes flicked between them. You're proposing me, Hermione said, as deputy, with authority over policy and legal review, not as decoration, not as a figurehead, actual power to shape how the auras operate. Harry stared at her. You were going to focus on legislation, he said, because he needed her safe, because he needed her not standing in the line of fire again. Hermione's expression hardened. I can do both, she said. I always do. She took a breath. And Harry, if you're going to be in charge of raids and arrests and responding to attacks, you need someone in the room who'll ask hard questions. Who'll stop you when your instincts are screaming war and you're supposed to be building peace? Harry's throat tightened. He'd never admitted it aloud, but she was right. Sometimes his instincts didn't feel like his anymore. They felt like a battlefield inside him, always waiting. He looked at Kingsley again. I'll do it, Harry said, and his voice sounded like it belonged to someone older. Then, quickly, because he needed it to be true, on one condition. Kingsley's face didn't change. Name it. Hermione becomes my second in command, Harry said. Officially. With full authority. If I'm making decisions that affect people's lives, I need her there. I need someone who will tell me when I'm wrong. Hermione's eyes widened. Harry, you will, he said, meeting her gaze. You always have. Kingsley stared at them for a long moment. Then something eased in his expression, something like relief. The first genuine smile I've seen from you in days, Harry thought. And that alone told him how desperate Kingsley was. Agreed, Kingsley said. Miss Granger, you'll be Deputy Head Aurore with special authority over policy and legal compliance. Hermione exhaled, and the sound was almost a laugh and almost a sob. McGonagall's shoulders slumped slightly, the way they did when she allowed herself a fraction of softness. Then we have a plan, she said. Or the beginning of one, Kingsley corrected. McGonagall's eyes sharpened. Hogwarts reopens September 1st. Kingsley nodded. The ministry begins reconstruction and reform immediately. And we face whatever comes next, Harry said, feeling the words settle into him like armor, with our eyes open and our wands ready. Dumbledore's portrait stirred, as if the agreement had woken him. If I might offer one observation, he said gently. The castle's portraits have been unusually active these past days. We see things, hear things, whispers in empty corridors, shadows that do not belong. McGonagall's spine straightened. What sort of whispers, Albus? The portrait's gaze went distant, as if listening to something beyond the room. The kind that suggest Hogwarts magic has not finished settling. Whatever fiendfire and death and blood did to this place, I do not believe it has stopped changing. An uneasy silence followed. Harry felt the hairs on his arms rise. He'd walked the corridors alone at night and heard things he couldn't name. A soft scrape behind him with no one there. A laugh that sounded like Peeves but wasn't. A door opening somewhere far away when the castle should have been sealed. He'd blamed exhaustion. Grief. Maybe it wasn't just that. Hermione gathered her parchments, practical as always. Right, she said briskly, as if briskness could push the chill away. I'll draft recruitment notices and start reviewing ministry personnel files. We need a complete audit. Who stays, who goes, who needs retraining, who's compromised. Harry nodded. Meet this afternoon. We'll assign watchers for the known bolt holes. And we need to triage the Aurore office. Response teams, patrol routes. Slow down, McGonagall cut in sharply. You will both eat and sleep, even if you must be forced. Hermione gave a small, exhausted smile. Yes, Professor. McGonagall stood. I'll speak with Mr. Longbottom and Miss Weasley and survey the castle's damage more thoroughly. They filed out, leaving Harry alone with Kingsley for a moment in the wounded office. Kingsley stepped close and clasped Harry's shoulder. You didn't ask for this, Kingsley said quietly. Harry stared out at the castle grounds through the office window, where sunlight fell on broken stone, like it didn't understand what had happened. No one did, Harry replied. Kingsley's hand tightened slightly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You deserved peace after everything. Harry's mind flashed again. Remus, Tonks, Fred, Colin. They deserved peace, Harry said softly. His voice shook now, despite his effort to hold it steady. We just have to make sure they didn't die for nothing. Kingsley released him, and Harry left the office. He descended the spiral staircase into the corridors again, into rubble and dust and the smell of burnt stone. House elves were already clearing debris, their small hands moving quickly, fiercely, as if labor could undo loss. The entrance hall lay ahead, empty and still. But somewhere above, a portrait laughed. A real laugh, a sharp burst of sound that surprised Harry so much he froze. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It was stubbornness, the kind of laughter that said, You didn't kill us. You didn't silence us. Harry exhaled slowly. The anonymous letters had said, "The phoenix cannot burn forever." He'd spent years with a phoenix feather in his wand, years hearing that faint, invisible song that made courage feel possible. Maybe burning forever was never the point. Maybe the point was rising. Every single time he touched his wand and started walking again, because the work of rebuilding was already happening around him, and now he didn't get to pretend he could simply watch. He had a badge to wear now, a title that didn't feel real, head or oar, a symbol, a target. And if the darkness really was regrouping, if the old ways really were returning, then he didn't have time to learn how to be this slowly. He'd have to become it in motion. The Ministry of Magic had never felt so empty. Kingsley Shacklebolt walked through the atrium at 6 in the morning, his footsteps echoing off golden tiles that still bore scorch marks from the final battle. The fountain was still gone, leaving a circular vacancy like a tooth torn out of the mouth of the building. Someone had placed flowers in the empty space yesterday. This morning they were already wilting. It had been 72 hours since he became minister, and Kingsley had learned something important. There was no such thing as after a war. There was only during, wearing different shapes. The golden gates stood open, half jammed that way, cursed hinges fused into twisted positions, like a memorial no one had commissioned, but everyone understood. Workers would repair them eventually, when eventually became a word the ministry could afford. For now, they stayed broken. Kingsley reached the lifts and stepped inside, pressing the button for Level 2. Level 2. Department of Magical Law Enforcement, including Aurora headquarters, including Harry Potter's new office. The lift rattled as it descended, and the voice announced, Level 2, as if the words were normal. Kingsley found himself thinking about something Harry had said the day before, when Kingsley had apologized for what he was asking. We just have to make sure they didn't die for nothing. Easy words to repeat, hard words to live. The doors opened onto a corridor that was already bustling despite the early hour. Auras arriving for shift change, administrators clutching coffee and folders, clerks trying to rebuild a bureaucracy that had lost half its institutional memory when people fled or died or were arrested. Percy Weasley intercepted Kingsley before he reached his temporary office. Minister, Percy said, voice brisk despite exhaustion. Good morning. The 7 o'clock meeting. Everyone's arrived except Hermione Granger. She sent word she'll be 5 minutes late. Files from records that couldn't wait. Kingsley almost smiled. Of course they couldn't. Percy adjusted his grip on the parchments in his arms. Who do we have? Harry Potter. Arthur Weasley, Elphias Doge, representing the Wisengamot Reforms Committee. Percy hesitated, then said the name like it tasted unpleasant. And Lucius Malfoy. Malfoy. The man who'd smiled as children were poisoned with ideology. The man who'd planted the diary that possessed Ginny. The man whose wealth had greased the gears of corruption for decades. Kingsley's first instinct was to refuse, to say, no, not here, not now, not after everything. But Kingsley didn't have the luxury of instinct anymore. Malfoy confirmed attendance. Percy said, his owl arrived last night. Very formal, very correct. Kingsley exhaled slowly. Good, he said, and the word felt like swallowing bitter medicine. We need him. Percy blinked. Unfortunately, Kingsley added. Percy nodded, tight-lipped, and led the way. As they walked, Kingsley asked quietly, How's your brother taking it? Percy didn't need to ask which brother. Ronald, Percy said, careful and controlled, has expressed his feelings in language our mother would hex him for. I don't blame him. They reached the conference room. It had been hastily repurposed from what used to be Pius Thickness's office. The dark artifacts were gone. The pretension remained in the bones of the room. as if corruption left stains even when you scrubbed. Inside, Harry was already seated, wearing formal robes that looked like they'd been forced onto him by someone practical and relentless. Hermione, Kingsley thought with quiet certainty. Arthur Weasley sat beside Harry, leaning in to murmur something that made Harry's shoulders loosen by a fraction. Elphius Doge occupied the far end of the table, ancient and watchful, and Lucius Malfoy stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over London like the city belonged to him. He turned as Kingsley entered. The aristocratic features were unchanged. Sharp cheekbones, silver hair, pale eyes. But the confidence that used to radiate from him like perfume was dulled now. Not gone, just tempered. "Minister," Malfoy said, inclining his head precisely the correct amount. "Not a bow, never submission, but acknowledgement." "Mr. Malfoy," Kingsley replied evenly. "Thank you for coming." Malfoy's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Did I have a choice?" "You always have a choice," Kingsley said. "That's rather the point of everything we're trying to build." Something flickered in Malfoy's eyes. Calculation, surprise, perhaps even irritation at being reminded he no longer lived in a world where his name was a key that opened every door. He sat. The door opened again. Hermione swept in, levitating a thick stack of folders that distributed themselves to each seat like obedient birds. Her cheeks were flushed from moving too fast, her eyes bright with that particular fire that meant she'd discovered something she couldn't ignore. "Apologies," she said briskly, dropping into the chair beside Harry. "The Records Office filing system is apparently organized by a method known only to the dead." Arthur gave a faint smile. Harry didn't. Kingsley watched Hermione open a folder, then lift her wand. "I found what we needed," Hermione said. "And what's that?" Arthur asked gently. Hermione tapped her wand on the table. An image appeared above them. No, not a memory. A complex chart, layered with names and dates and votes and lines, connecting everything into a web that looked like a spider's dream. "This," Hermione said, voice steady, "is every major Wizengamot vote since 1948. Kingsley leaned forward despite himself. Hermione's wand flicked. Certain names lit in red. Werewolf Registry Act. Marriage Law Amendments. Muggle-Born Registration Commission. Every discriminatory measure that's passed in the last half-century." Her wand flicked again. The same cluster of names burned red each time. Malfoy, Parkinson, Knott, Yaxley, Crabbe, Goyle, Selwyn. Arthur swallowed. "The traditional pure-blood block." "Yes," Hermione said. "But look at this." Another cluster lit in amber. "These are the moderate families, the ones who make speeches about unity, the ones who pretend to support equal rights." Kingsley felt his stomach tighten as he read the names. Greengrass, Bones, before Amelia, when her aunt held the seat. Abbott, Macmillan. "They could have blocked these votes," Harry said slowly, seeing the pattern now. Hermione nodded sharply. "They didn't. They abstained. Every single time the vote mattered, they abstained." Silence swallowed the room. Hermione raised a folder and slid it across the table. "And according to financial records buried in archives," she continued, "many of these moderate families received significant anonymous donations to their estates around the same time they abstained." She paused deliberately, then met Malfoy's eyes. Donations traced through 6 intermediary accounts, but ultimately originating from the Malfoy vault at Gringotts. Malfoy didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He simply looked at the chart, then back at Kingsley, as if he were discussing a minor inconvenience in estate management. "Yes," Lucius Malfoy said calmly. "I'm aware." Harry half rose from his seat. Ron wasn't there, but Kingsley could almost hear the echo of Ron's fury through Harry's movement. "You're admitting you bribed them," Harry said, voice dangerous. Malfoy's gaze slid to him without fear. "I'm admitting my father bribed them," he corrected, tone smooth. Abraxas Malfoy perfected the art of political influence through carefully managed generosity. "I maintained the tradition until recently." "Why tell us?" Arthur asked, genuinely baffled. "Why sit here and—" "Because," Malfoy said, and for the first time his calm seemed to contain something like bitterness directed inward. "I find myself in the unusual position of wanting the same thing you do. Temporarily, at least." Kingsley held his voice steady. "Explain." Malfoy reached into his robes and withdrew a roll of parchment. "The Wizengamot vote is scheduled for August 15th, he said. "The Emergency Powers Act. It would grant the Wizengamot authority to override ministerial decisions with a simple majority vote, rather than the traditional two-thirds." Hermione's eyes narrowed. "We know." "The sponsors claim it's about preventing another Dark Lord," Malfoy continued. "In reality, it is a power grab by the remaining pureblood families. They want to control you, Minister. They want the ministry to be a puppet again." Elphias Doge's ancient hands tightened on the table. "You're saying they can pass it." "They will," Malfoy said bluntly. "Counter-arguments won't matter. You don't have the votes." Hermione's quill scratched furiously. "We have 17 at best." "You need 23 to block the measure," Malfoy said. "You have 17. The traditional bloc has 18 guaranteed seats, and the moderates," his mouth curved faintly, "can be persuaded to abstain." Harry sat back slowly, as if the chair had grown heavier. Kingsley felt the cold clarity of it. This was what war looked like now, not curses in the open. Votes, parchment, procedure. Malfoy placed his parchment on the table. "I can deliver 6 more votes," he said. Arthur's face tightened. "And what do you want in return?" Malfoy didn't bother pretending. "Clemency." Harry's fingers tightened around his wand under the table. Malfoy lifted a hand slightly, as if calming an animal. "Not for the truly guilty. Not for murderers. Not for the ones who chose Voldemort enthusiastically. For the children." Hermione's expression sharpened. "You want us to excuse Death Eaters. I want you to distinguish between Antonin Dolohov," Malfoy said, voice cool, "and a 16-year-old who was told his family would be murdered if he didn't take the mark." His pale eyes flicked, almost lazily, to Harry. "Surely you understand coercion, Mr. Potter. You lived under it for years." Harry's jaw clenched. Hermione's voice was tight when she spoke. "We've already made distinctions in the trials. Imperious victims, coerced participants, reduced sentences for cooperation. This formalizes it," Malfoy said, "and it protects my son." There it was, not hidden, not danced around. Draco. Harry's mind flashed, unwillingly, to Draco trembling in the room of requirement, to Draco lowering his wand, to Draco throwing Harry his wand in the chaos of the battle. A boy who had been raised like a weapon and then discovered too late that weapons break. Kingsley studied Malfoy across the table. Lucius Malfoy had spent decades building the structure they were now trying to dismantle. Now he was offering to pull out one of its central supports. Not out of kindness, out of survival. Kingsley didn't like it. But Kingsley didn't have the luxury of liking. "Why should we trust you?" Kingsley asked quietly. Malfoy's answer came immediately. "You shouldn't." "I wouldn't trust myself if I were you," Malfoy continued. "But trust isn't required for this transaction. I deliver votes. You provide protections under strict criteria. Everyone gets what they need." "And if you don't deliver," Hermione asked sharply. "Then the act passes," Malfoy said. "Within 6 months you'll be voted out. The pure blood block will install someone more sympathetic, someone who will reverse your reforms without firing a single spell. Harry's voice was flat. And everything we fought for ends. Malfoy's eyes held his. Exactly. Kingsley felt the room tilt toward the edge of a cliff. He had expected threats in alleyways, curses in shadows, assassins. He had expected to fight the remnants of Voldemort with auras and raids. He had not expected to fight them with procedure while sitting across from Lucius Malfoy. But maybe he should have, because this was how the old world survived so long. Not by strength alone, but by making itself seem inevitable. Malfoy stood, smoothing his robes like the meeting had been a business appointment. "One more thing," he said, pausing at the door. "The attacks, the letters, the firebombs are being funded. Someone with significant resources is bankrolling their activities." Harry was on his feet instantly. "Who?" Malfoy's mouth tightened. "I don't know. Voldemort kept secrets even from his inner circle, but there were always rumors. Contingency vaults, hidden assets, supporters who never revealed themselves." He looked back at Kingsley. "Someone is activating those networks now." Hermione's quill stilled. Ron would have been swearing. Harry's eyes were hard. Malfoy's gaze flicked to Harry. "My son is at the manor under house arrest. He knows some of these people. He might be convinced to share information if approached correctly." "By whom?" Hermione demanded. Malfoy's pale eyes met Harry's green ones. "By someone he respects," Malfoy said softly. "And perhaps someone he owes a life debt to." Then he was gone, leaving the faint scent of expensive cologne and the sharper scent of calculation. The room stayed silent for several heartbeats. Harry finally spoke, voice dangerously calm. "I need to hex something," Arthur muttered. "Get in line." Hermione was already scribbling. "He's right about the votes. I've run the numbers. We're short." Elphius Doge looked older than ever. "Then we must accept his offer. We're making deals with Malfoy. We're making deals with reality," Kingsley said, and hated how cold that sounded. "Arthur, I know what he's done. Merlin knows I do. But show me a better option. Show me a way to block that act without his votes." No one spoke, because there wasn't one. Hermione lifted her head. "I'll draft the clemency framework. Tight criteria, age limits, evidence of coercion, no violent crimes, and anyone protected must provide intelligence. We don't give clemency for nothing." Kingsley nodded. "Agreed." Arthur sighed deeply. "Molly will have opinions, strong ones." "Mine too," Harry said quietly. "But we did ugly things during the war, because the alternative was worse." Hermione's eyes flicked to him. "And we swore we'd be better after." "We will be," Kingsley said firmly. "That's the difference. We do it by law, by oversight, with accountability." He looked at Harry. "And you," Kingsley said, voice turning sharp, "will go to Malfoy Manor. Talk to Draco. Find out what he knows about who's funding these attacks." Harry's expression tightened, like someone had offered him poison to drink. "You want me to interrogate Draco Malfoy. I want you to talk to someone who might actually tell you the truth," Kingsley corrected. "You saved his life. Twice. That means something, even to a Malfoy. Use it." Harry stared at the table for a long moment, then nodded once. "Fine," he said. "But if he tries anything—" "He won't," Hermione cut in softly. "Not if he's as frightened as his father is." Kingsley pushed back from the table. "We have 9 days until the vote. 9 days to prevent the ministry from being strangled legally." He looked around the room. Arthur, Hermione, Harry, Alpheus, Percy, a patchwork alliance of exhausted people. trying to rebuild a country that didn't want to stop bleeding. This is what rebuilding looks like, Kingsley said quietly, as if reminding himself. Uncomfortable choices, hard compromises, decisions that will be judged for decades. Harry stood, jaw set, then let them judge. He turned toward the door, and for a moment Kingsley saw the boy in him again. Thin shoulders, carrying impossible weight. Then Harry's posture shifted, his shoulders squared, his chin lifted, head oral. Not because he wanted it, because the world had decided he had to be, and Harry Potter had never been allowed to be anything else when the world demanded a hero. As Harry left, Hermione gathered her parchments, eyes already distant as she began building legislation in her head. Arthur's hands trembled slightly as he folded the chart away, as if trying to fold the past into something manageable. Kingsley watched them go and felt, briefly, the strangest thing. Not hope, not relief, a grim, stubborn determination that tasted like iron. Because now he understood. Voldemort had died, but the war hadn't ended. It had simply become clever. Malfoy Manor looked the same from the outside. That was what unsettled Harry most. The iron gates still curved like claws. The hedges were still clipped into perfect, arrogant shapes. The pale stone of the house still rose out of the winter landscape, as if it had grown there, certain of its own permanence. It didn't look like a place that had been occupied by Death Eaters. It didn't look like a place where people had screamed. It looked like a place that had never believed consequences applied to it. Two auras stood at the gate now, cloaked in ministry winter gear, wands at the ready. They didn't relax when they saw Harry. They straightened instead, eyes sharpening, because the boy who lived still made people uncertain about how to behave. One of them, an older witch with cropped dark hair, swallowed and nodded. Head, Auror, Potter. Harry hated the title in her mouth. He hated how it made him feel like he was wearing someone else's skin. "Open it," he said. The gate groaned, metal protesting as wards recognized his authority. The Auror on duty lifted his wand and traced a careful sequence of checks. Curses, concealed hexes, illusion charms, anything that might suggest the Malfoys were planning something clever. The wand tip flared, then dimmed. Clear. The Auror reported, but his tone made it clear he didn't believe in clear anymore. Harry stepped through, snow crunching under his boots. The path to the manor felt longer than it should have. The silence here was different from Hogwarts's wounded quiet. Hogwarts's silence was grief. This was controlled. A quiet that had been bought and maintained and polished. The front doors opened before Harry reached them. Narcissa Malfoy stood in the doorway. She wore black, not theatrical mourning black, but the sort of elegant darkness she'd always worn, as if pale colors were beneath her. Her hair was pinned back, platinum and sharp. Her face was composed, but Harry had learned something over the past months. Pure blood composure was often just fear with excellent manners. "Mr. Potter," Narcissa said, and the word sounded like a test of her own throat. Harry nodded. He didn't trust his voice yet. Something about being here made memories shove at him from all sides. Hermione tortured in the drawing room. Bellatrix laughing. Dobby dying with his eyes too bright. "You're cold," Narcissa said abruptly, as if she'd noticed the snow on his shoulders and needed something mundane to focus on. "Come in." Harry stepped into the foyer. Everything smelled expensive. Wax, polished wood, faint floral perfume clinging to curtains. The chandelier overhead glittered as if it had never seen dark magic. The floor beneath his feet was so clean, it felt like it was trying to deny the blood that had once splattered across it. Narcissa shut the doors, and the sound was final. The auras outside remained visible through the glass for a moment. Then a ward shimmered, and the view blurred. Not a concealment charm. Harry felt the ministry ward's signatures layered into it. but a privacy screen keyed to official meetings. "This way," Narcissus said, turning. Harry followed. The drawing room was smaller than he remembered. Or maybe it just felt smaller now that the fear attached to it had shifted shape. The chairs were the same, carved and ornate. The fire burned quietly in the hearth. Tea had already been set out on a low table, like someone had decided life continued, only if you kept pouring it. Draco Malfoy stood by the mantel. He didn't turn immediately. His shoulders were tight, his posture rigid, with the kind of tension that never fully leaves once it has moved in. He looked older than 18, not in height, not in build, but in the way his eyes held too much. Harry saw with a jolt the faint scar along Draco's forearm, where the dark mark had been removed by ministry healers. It wasn't gone completely. Dark magic didn't vanish that neatly, but it was faded, as if shame had been cut out in flesh. Draco turned, and for a second neither of them spoke. They had been enemies for so long that silence felt like the only honest greeting. Then Draco's mouth twisted, a reflex that might once have been a smirk, but now failed halfway. "Head or Potter," he said, voice flat. Harry didn't rise to it. "Draco," he replied simply. Narcissa's gaze flicked between them, as if reading the air like a book. Then she did something Harry hadn't expected. She left. No dramatic exit. No sharp words. She simply glided out of the room and shut the door behind her, leaving Harry alone with Draco and the fire and the ghosts of what had happened here. Draco's hands clenched, then unclenched. "So," he said, and the words sounded like someone stepping onto thin ice. "This is what it's come to." Harry's patience was a thin wire. "We don't have time for games." Draco laughed once, short and humorless. "Games, right. As if that's what this is." Harry took a breath, forcing himself to remember what Kingsley had said. Talk, not interrogate. Truth, not threats. He pulled a folded parchment from his robes and set it on the table between them. "Your father says you know names," Harry said. Draco's eyes flicked to the parchment, but he didn't reach for it. "My father says a lot of things." Harry's jaw tightened. "Draco." Draco's gaze snapped up, sharp. "Don't," he said, and there was real warning in it. "Don't say my name like you think it means you know me now. Don't pretend we're—" His voice faltered, then hardened. "Don't pretend you understand what it's like to be raised in that." Harry's anger flared, immediate and hot, because the words were unfair, and also because some bitter part of him understood what Draco meant. Harry had been raised under cruelty too. Different kind, different house, but cruelty nonetheless. "I don't," Harry said, voice low. "But I don't need to understand your childhood to understand this. People are dying." Draco's expression shifted. Not guilt exactly, but something that looked like nausea. Harry pressed on. "Flourish and blots. The reversal office. More attacks coming. We need to know who's funding them." Draco exhaled slowly, as if bracing himself. "You think it's my father. I think your father spent his whole life buying influence. I think he's perfectly capable of financing violence while smiling over tea," Harry said. "But Kingsley thinks he isn't the one doing this now." Draco's mouth twitched. "Kingsley thinks my father is a person." Harry didn't reply. Draco walked to the window, then stopped. He didn't look outside. He stared at the glass as if it were a barrier between him and everything he'd ever been taught. "There were always rumors," Draco said, voice quieter now, even when he was alive. "Contingency funds, vaults set up under false names, properties owned through shell companies, investments in Muggle businesses, income streams that didn't touch the Ministry's eyes." Harry felt the hairs on his arms rise. Voldemort's money. Draco nodded once. Not his, Exactly. He didn't trust anyone enough to hold it all himself. It was distributed among believers, families, people who'd never taken the mark because they didn't need to. They supported with gold, not wands. Hermione would call them the quiet spine of the movement, Harry thought. The ones who kept it alive while pretending they were innocent. Who? Harry asked. Draco's hands tightened around the window ledge. I don't know the center. I knew. Edges. Names I heard in passing. Names that came to dinner. Names my father spoke about as if they were weather. Tell me. Draco turned. His pale face looked almost grey in the firelight. If I do, he said, this doesn't just put me in danger. Harry's eyes narrowed. You're already in danger. Draco's laugh was bitter. Yes, but there are different kinds of danger, Potter. There's danger from the ones you can see, and there's danger from the ones who smile at you and invite you to charity galas and quietly make sure your world collapses. Harry held his gaze. Names. Draco looked like he might refuse, like he might cling to old loyalty out of habit, out of fear, out of the instinct to protect himself. Then, surprisingly, he said, Why should I help you? Harry's first instinct was rage, because people didn't get to bargain over lives. But then he remembered Draco had grown up watching his father bargain over everything. Bargaining was Draco's language. It might be the only one he trusted. Because if you don't, Harry said, they'll keep killing people. They'll keep burning shops and bombing offices and writing threats until the ministry breaks. And when it breaks, they don't stop. They don't go back to tea and parties. They go back to what you saw in this house when Voldemort lived here. Draco flinched. Harry stepped closer, just enough that Draco couldn't pretend Harry wasn't serious. You know what that was like, Harry said quietly. If you think that's a world you can survive in. Draco's eyes flashed. Don't, he hissed. Harry didn't back down. Tell me who's funding them. Draco's hands trembled. For a moment, Harry saw it clearly. Draco wasn't deciding whether to help the ministry. Draco was deciding whether to betray the world he'd been raised in. And betrayal was never simple. Even when the world deserved it, Draco finally exhaled, a thin, shuddering breath. He moved to the table, picked up Harry's parchment, then set it down again without opening it. It's not one person, Draco said. It's a loose alliance. They're not all calling themselves Death Eaters. They want to be something new, clean, like they can wash off the stain of Voldemort by changing the name. What name? Harry asked. Draco's jaw tightened. The serpent's hand. The words landed like something cold. Harry felt instinct and dread flare together. A core group uses that name, Draco continued. Not everyone, but the ones planning attacks, the ones coordinating, they use it. Who are they? Harry asked. Draco swallowed. I can give you a list of people I've heard linked to it. Some are direct, some are suspicions, but there are names. Harry held still. How many? 17. Draco said, voice barely audible. Harry felt a grim, sharp satisfaction at the clarity of it. 17 was a number you could work with. 17 was something you could chase. It wasn't a fog. Draco reached toward the fireplace and pulled a small, folded piece of parchment from behind a decorative frame, as if he'd hidden it there to remind himself that this decision wasn't imaginary. He slid it across the table to Harry. Harry stared at it for a heartbeat. Why were you ready? He asked quietly. Draco's mouth twisted. Because I knew this day would come, he said. Because I knew you'd show up eventually, or someone would. Because you can't sit on secrets like these and pretend the world won't demand them. Harry unfolded the parchment. Names written in Draco's neat, careful hand. Some Harry recognized immediately. second-generation families, lesser branches of old pure blood lines. Others were unfamiliar, new money, new influence, the sort of people who hid behind respectable faces. Harry read each name and felt his stomach tighten with each one, because every name was a door that could open into violence. When he finished, he looked up. Draco was watching him with something that wasn't quite defiance and wasn't quite fear. "Does this save me?" Draco asked quietly. Harry's first instinct was to say yes, to offer comfort, to offer certainty. But that would have been a lie, and Harry had learned that lies were poison, even when they were meant kindly. "No," Harry said honestly, "it helps. It gives us a chance, but it doesn't make you safe." Draco's throat bobbed. "Right," he said, as if he'd expected that. Harry folded the parchment carefully and slid it into his robe. "I need more," Harry said. "Not just names. Connections. Money routes. Anything you know about how they move gold." Draco's expression hardened again. "That's the part I don't have," he said. "I wasn't trusted with vault details. I was trusted with image." Harry almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. "A symbol." Draco's eyes flicked up. "Yes," he said quietly. "A symbol." For a moment, something passed between them, a recognition, uncomfortable and sharp. Both of them had been turned into symbols against their will. Both of them had been used. Harry pushed through it. "Your father said he might not know who's accessing the funds," Harry said. "Do you believe him?" Draco hesitated, and the hesitation was an answer all by itself. "I believe," Draco said slowly, "that my father knows more than he admits." "That's what I thought." Draco's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why are you here? Why talk to me like this is civil? If you think my father's lying, arrest him." Harry's jaw tightened. "We don't arrest people without evidence." Draco stared at him like he'd spoken nonsense. "That's not how your world used to work." "That's why we're rebuilding it," Harry said. Draco's gaze dropped. His voice came out quieter. "You're really going to try?" Harry didn't answer immediately, because he didn't know if trying was bravery or stubbornness or simply refusing to accept that everything was pointless. He only knew he couldn't stop. "I need to ask you something else," Harry said. Draco stiffened. "What?" "The Serpent's Hand," Harry said. "Do you know anything about their leadership? Anyone who might be at the center?" Draco's eyes flicked away. "Rumors," he said. "Always rumors. People whispered about a patron, someone with resources, someone who didn't fight openly, just moved pieces." "Name?" Harry pressed. Draco swallowed. "I can't," he said. "Not because I don't want to, because I don't know." Harry watched him carefully, searching for deceit. Draco met his gaze steadily. Harry believed him, and that was unsettling in its own way. "Then we'll find out," Harry said. Draco's mouth twisted. "Good luck. They're clever. Cleverer than the ones who wore masks and screamed slurs. These ones use ink and law and money." Harry thought of the Wisengamot petition, of abstentions bought quietly, of moderates paid to look away. He thought of Kingsley's exhausted face. "They're already doing it," Harry said. Draco's shoulders sagged slightly, as if hearing it said aloud made it more real. "Yes," he said, "they are." Harry turned toward the door, then paused. "Narcissa," he said without looking back. "They threatened her." Draco's face tightened. "Not yet," he said. "But they will, because she lied to Voldemort, because she saved you, because she chose me over him." Harry felt something twist in his chest. "She saved my life," Harry said quietly. Draco didn't reply, but his eyes flickered, and Harry saw something there. something almost like grief. Harry opened the door. Narcissa waited just outside, composed again, hands folded neatly, as if she'd never been afraid. "Did he help you?" she asked, voice too controlled. Harry nodded. "Yes." Narcissa's eyes closed for a brief second, relief slipping through before she regained her mask. "Good," she whispered, and the words sounded like prayer. Harry hesitated, then said something he hadn't expected to say when he arrived. "They're coming," he told her. "Not necessarily today, but soon. The ones who want to punish anyone they think betrayed them." Narcissa's chin lifted. "Let them," she said coldly. Harry heard the fear under it anyway. "I'll make sure you have protection," Harry said. Her pale eyes sharpened. "From you." It wasn't a question. It was an assessment. Harry nodded once. "From the ministry," he corrected. Then, because it mattered, from me. Narcissa watched him for a long moment, then inclined her head the same precise amount Lucius had. Not gratitude. Acknowledgement. Harry stepped out into the winter air. The auras at the gate straightened, ready to escort him. Snow drifted down, soft and indifferent. Harry's fingers tightened around the folded parchment in his pocket. 17 names. A new enemy with a new name. And the sinking certainty that this was only the first layer, because Voldemort's world had never been built on one man. It had been built on 1,000 quiet choices, on families who whispered purity over dinner, on men who signed laws with clean hands, on gold that moved like blood through the veins of society. Harry walked back through the gates, and for the first time since the battle, he realized something with sharp clarity. Defeating Voldemort had been the easy part. Now they had to defeat everything that had made Voldemort possible. And somewhere, hidden behind money and manners and ink, the serpent's hand was already moving. The first time Harry read Draco's list in his own office, it didn't feel like intelligence. It felt like a threat. He sat behind a desk that still smelled faintly of someone else's cologne, in a room that had once belonged to an Auror who'd fled during the final months of the war. The walls had been scrubbed clean, the dark artifacts removed, the drawers emptied of anything that might be dangerous. But the room carried a residue anyway, the way certain places did after bad magic. Harry spread the parchment out on the desk and stared. 17 names, 17 doors, 17 ways for a war to keep living long after everyone had agreed it should be dead. Hermione arrived 10 minutes later, hair pinned back too tightly, cheeks flushed from moving too fast. A stack of files levitating behind her, like a parade of problems. She took one look at Harry's expression and didn't ask if he'd been to the manor. She knew. "Let me see," she said, already reaching. Harry slid the parchment across. Hermione read in silence. Her eyes moved quickly, not skimming, absorbing. When she reached the end, her mouth had gone very still. "These aren't the obvious ones," she said at last. "These aren't the loud supporters. This is infrastructure." Harry nodded once. Infrastructure. That was the word. Not soldiers, not masks, not screaming fanatics. The kind of people who funded soldiers. The kind of people who hosted dinners where ideas were planted like seeds and then watered with gold. Hermione tapped the parchment with her wand. A duplicate floated up into the air, then folded itself neatly and tucked into a file labeled Operational. "Good," she said. "Now we do what they won't expect." Harry looked up. "Which is?" Hermione's gaze sharpened. "We do this like adults." He almost smiled, but the exhaustion in him was too heavy for humor. "Meaning?" Harry prompted. "Meaning we don't storm homes because we feel like it," Hermione said, voice tight. "We don't threaten people because we're angry. We build a case that survives the Wisengamot. We prove patterns. We trace money. We identify who is connected to whom, and then we cut the entire network at once. Harry leaned back in the chair that didn't quite fit him. And how do we trace money through Gringotts? He asked, when goblins treat the ministry like a barking dog they refuse to acknowledge. Hermione's eyes flickered. We don't start with Gringotts, she said. We start with behavior. Harry frowned. Behavior doesn't convict, Hermione replied. Letters, owls, meeting records, property transfers, sudden changes in spending, new wards installed on estates, new security charms, new hiring patterns. Harry stared at her. Hermione looked almost offended by his doubt. Harry, the magical world thinks it can hide everything because it's small and secret and uses spells. But that also makes it trackable. There are only so many spellcrafters capable of installing high-grade wards. Only so many apothecaries who sell certain ingredients. Only so many people who can get their hands on dark items without leaving a trail. She drew a parchment from her stack and slapped it down. A list. Names, dates, transactions. Harry's stomach dropped. You've already started, he said. Hermione's expression didn't soften. I started the day Kingsley asked me to help rebuild this government, she said, because I knew something like this would happen. Harry looked at the paper again. Some of Draco's names already appeared in her records. Not as criminals, not yet, but as people who had moved money, bought property, requested certain permits, filed certain legal petitions. This is what frightens me, Harry said quietly. Hermione's gaze lifted. What? How normal it looks, Harry said. Because it did. It looked like paperwork, like society continuing, like wealth doing what wealth always did, and somewhere behind it, people were dying. A knock interrupted them. Robards entered without waiting to be called, because in this department, nobody waited anymore. He held a folder in one hand and a coffee in the other, and he looked like the war had never stopped living in his spine. Potter, he said, voice rough. Then, because the title mattered now, head Auror. Harry hated the formality, but he nodded. What is it? Roberts placed the folder down. Another bolt hole, he said. Found under Nocturne Alley. Hidden cellar. Wards. Disillusionment, charm, residue. Someone's been using it recently. Harry's hand instinctively moved toward his wand. Hermione's voice stayed steady. Casualties? None, Robard said. But there's something else. He opened the folder. Photos slid out onto the desk. Not moving photos, but still ones charmed to preserve detail. The first was a wall. A symbol painted in black. Not the dark mark, but close enough to make Harry's stomach tighten. A serpent, curved into a shape that resembled a hand, fingers formed by the snake's body, the head positioned like a ring. The serpent's hand. Underneath it, words. The phoenix cannot burn forever. Harry stared at the phrase, and in his mind he heard it like a whisper read aloud in Kingsley's office. Anonymous letters. Threats. Hermione's mouth tightened. They're repeating it, she said. They want it to spread. They want it to feel inevitable, Harry murmured. Like a prophecy. Roberts nodded grimly. We also found a ledger, he said. Not a full one. Torn pages. But enough to suggest they've been paying people. Hermione's eyes snapped up. Paying who? Robards slid another photograph forward. A list of initials, dates, amounts. Harry stared. Hermione's voice came out sharp. This is coded, she said. But I recognize the structure. Harry looked at her. From where? Hermione's gaze went distant, mind assembling pieces quickly. It's a payroll code, she said. Like ministry salaries, like the ones used for hush payments and discretionary budgets. Whoever wrote this understands how government accounting works. Harry felt cold spread in his chest. That means, Harry said slowly, someone inside. Hermione nodded once. Or someone trained by someone inside. Roberts exhaled. Kingsley will want to hear that. He'll want more than that, Hermione corrected. He'll want proof. Harry stared at the symbol again, the serpent hand painted on stone. It felt like being watched, not by magic, by people, by patience. They're not just hitting targets, Harry said quietly. They're setting up a narrative. Hermione's eyes didn't leave the photos. They're making sure everyone knows they exist, she said, which means they want recruits. They want frightened moderates. They want angry teenagers. Harry thought of Hogwarts reopening, of empty seats, of Draco walking into the great hall, and everyone going silent. How long until they come for the castle? Harry asked. Hermione didn't answer immediately, because the answer was already in the air. Soon. The meeting with Kingsley happened an hour later in a room that used to hold tribunals. Now it held planning maps and coffee cups and fear. Kingsley stood at the front with Percy at his side. Arthur Weasley seated with his hands folded, so tightly his knuckles were pale, and Alpheus Doge watching like an old man who had seen the wizarding world make the same mistakes too many times. Harry laid Draco's list on the table. Hermione laid her files beside it. Robards placed the photos down last, like punctuation. Kingsley read without speaking. When he reached the symbol, something hardened in him. It's spreading, he said. Yes, Hermione replied. It's designed to. Kingsley turned to Harry. Malfoy's list. Credible. Harry nodded. Draco wasn't guessing, he said. He was giving names he'd heard around dinner tables, names his father trusted enough to speak around him. It's not complete, but it's real. Arthur's jaw tightened. And Lucius wants clemency for the children, he said, voice thick with restrained anger. 6 votes in exchange for sealed records. Kingsley's expression didn't change. And we need those votes, he said. Harry watched Arthur's hands, trembling slightly. Arthur had lived his whole life being mocked by families like Malfoy. Now he had to sit here and listen to them bargain with the future. It makes me sick, Harry said bluntly. Kingsley's gaze flicked to him. Good, he said quietly. It should. Hermione spoke. We found evidence of coded payments, she said. They're paying someone, possibly inside the ministry, possibly someone trained in ministry accounting. We've had identity tokens go missing, he said. 15 in 2 months. Kingsley's face tightened. Which we assumed was negligence. Which, Hermione said, was a mistake. Kingsley ran a hand over his face. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to be an Auror again, to kick indoors and end problems with force. But he stayed still. We're going to do this properly, Kingsley said finally, voice steady. We are not becoming a government that arrests people because we're frightened. Harry felt anger flare. People are dying, he said. How many do we let die while we build a case? Kingsley's gaze cut to him, sharp and tired. As many as die if we lose the law, he said. Harry, listen to me. If we start skipping due process, if we start making arrests without evidence because it feels justified, we give them exactly what they want. Hermione nodded slowly. Fear, she said. Overreaction. They want the ministry to look tyrannical. They want moderates to become sympathizers because they think we're persecuting purebloods. They want to turn the conversation into the new regime is just as dangerous as the old one. Harry's fists clenched. He hated that Kingsley was right. Then what? Harry demanded. Kingsley looked around the table. Then we set bait, he said. Silence fell. Hermione's eyes widened slightly. Robards' mouth tightened. Arthur's brows rose, as if he couldn't decide whether the idea was brilliant or horrifying. "You said we wouldn't," Percy began. "I said we wouldn't compromise due process," Kingsley replied. "A sting operation is not compromising due process. It's strategic." Harry's heart beat harder. "A trap," he said. Kingsley nodded once. "We feed false information through official channels," he said, gaze settling on Hermione, just enough for the leak to pass it along. "The serpent's hand takes the bait, and when they strike, we're waiting." Hermione swallowed, mind already spinning. "We need the right target," she said. "Something they can't resist. Something symbolic," Harry added. Kingsley's gaze hardened. "Something that draws them in," he said, "but doesn't put real civilians at risk." Arthur leaned forward. "They've been hitting Muggle-born rights officers and public spaces," he said. "They want fear. They want spectacle." Hermione nodded. "So we give them something that looks like a spectacular target," she said. "But we control it." Percy's voice came out tight. "We're talking about drawing terrorists to a location inside our jurisdiction." "Yes," Kingsley said. "And if it goes wrong," Percy said, "if they break through, then we make sure it doesn't," Robards said grimly. Harry's mind was already racing ahead, imagining it like a battlefield map, a location they could ward heavily, a location with controlled access, a location that looked meaningful enough to tempt the serpent's hand into overconfidence. Hermione's eyes lifted. "A registry reversal office," she said, then shook her head. "No, they've already hit one. They'll suspect we're guarding it. A Wizengamot archive," Harry offered. "They'd love to destroy records of collaboration." Hermione's gaze sharpened. "Too close to our own infrastructure," she said. "If that burns, we lose essential files." Kingsley's voice cut through. "What about Diagon Alley?" he asked. Arthur stiffened. "Too many people," he said immediately. Kingsley nodded. "Right, no civilians." Hermione's mind clicked into place. "Hogwarts," she said. The word dropped into the room like a stone. Harry's stomach tightened. "No," he said instantly. Hermione met his gaze. "Not with students," she said quickly. "Not with children. But Hogwarts has abandoned sections, repaired corridors, wards. It's symbolically important. And if the serpent's hand wants to prove the phoenix can't burn forever, attacking the school itself would be irresistible." Harry felt cold anger and fear twist together. Kingsley's eyes narrowed. "A sting in the castle," he said slowly. "An empty wing," Hermione pressed. "A controlled area. We announce, publicly, that a new ministry archive for Muggle-born restoration will be stored temporarily at Hogwarts for security. We make it sound like we're protecting something valuable there." Roberts shook his head. "Risky," he said. "Hogwarts magic is still unstable." McGonagall said, "The room of requirement is unpredictable." "We don't use the room of requirement," Hermione replied sharply. "We use a repaired corridor with stable wards." Arthur's face tightened. "Molly will hex every single one of us if we turn Hogwarts into a battlefield again." Harry's throat tightened. "Ginny is there," he said quietly. Hermione's expression softened for half a second, then hardened again. "I know," she said, "which is why we don't do it with students present." Kingsley's gaze slid to Harry, and Harry felt the command weight behind it. "We can do it over the summer," Kingsley said, "before term starts. Or we can do it during a holiday period when students are off the grounds." Harry's mind flashed to Draco's list, to the symbol, to the coded payments. "They're moving now," Harry said. "They're not going to wait for summer." Kingsley's jaw tightened. "Then we don't wait either," he said. Silence. In it, Harry heard something else. Memory. He remembered being 15, forming the DA in secret, thinking rebellion was something you did with speeches and bravery and hidden rooms. Now rebellion looked like drafting legislation and setting traps and choosing which risks were acceptable. And the worst part was that there were no clean options, only choices, only consequences. All right, Harry said finally, voice low. We design the operation. Hermione nodded once. Every detail, she said. Every contingency. No improvising. Robards looked at Harry. You'll lead breach, he said, half statement, half question. Harry felt the weight settle again, familiar as armor. Yes, he said. Kingsley exhaled, sharp. Then we have a plan, he said. Arthur's voice came out quiet, strained. Just promise me, he said, eyes on Kingsley, that we're not making a deal with the devil twice. Harry thought of Snape, thought of Malfoy, thought of everything messy and morally complicated that had saved them before. We already made that deal, Harry said quietly. The first time we chose to trust someone we hated because we needed the outcome more than we needed comfort. Arthur's face tightened, and it nearly destroyed us. Yes, Harry said, but it also saved us. Kingsley's gaze moved across them, heavy and determined. We do it smarter this time, he said. We do it with oversight. We do it with the law behind us. We do it so that when the dust settles, no one can claim we became monsters to catch monsters. Hermione gathered her parchments, eyes already calculating. I'll draft the operational framework, she said. Ward plans, legal authorizations, arrest protocols, and I want written rules of engagement. I'll start mapping possible sites, he said. We need a location we can lock down completely. Harry stood. I'll assign surveillance teams on Draco's names, he said, and I'll start training the auras for a coordinated breach. Kingsley nodded once. Good, he said, and I'll do what ministers do. Percy looked up. Which is? Kingsley's mouth twisted without humor. I'll lie convincingly, he said, in public, with parchment, so the right people overhear it. They filed out into corridors that buzzed with the thin, frantic energy of a government trying to pretend it was stable. Harry walked back to his office, Draco's list heavy in his pocket. He should have felt victory because they had a plan. Instead, he felt hunted, because now the serpent's hand wasn't just a shadow in stories. It had a name, a symbol, a strategy, and it had already moved deep enough into their world to steal identity tokens and code payments and paint warnings like prophecies. Harry sat at his desk again, opened his notebook, and wrote one sentence at the top of a blank page. We are not fighting Voldemort. We are fighting what came after him. Then he wrote another, and it starts inside the ministry. He stared at the words until they blurred. Outside his office door, someone laughed, an auror trying too hard to sound normal. Harry didn't laugh back. He reached for his wand, not because he expected an attack in the corridor, but because he couldn't stop checking that it was there, because in his bones he still didn't believe peace was real. And in the quiet spaces between meetings and files, in the moments when the ministry lights flickered and the air went cold for no reason at all, he swore he could feel something else moving. Not magic. People. Watching. Waiting. By the time the sting operation became more than an idea, Harry had stopped counting how many times he'd been awake for 20 hours straight. Sleep was a luxury now, something you took in scraps, like stolen food. A chair in his office, the narrow bed at Grimmauld Place. 5 minutes with his head against a wall, while Hermione argued with Percy over legal wording. Every time he slept, he dreamed of footsteps in empty corridors. Every time he woke, he reached for his wand before he remembered where he was. The ministry was rebuilding on the surface. The atrium tiles had been scrubbed clean. New banners hung where Death Eater symbols had once appeared. The fountains had been restored, though not the old one. Kingsley had ordered a new design, something that didn't celebrate hierarchy. Workers hammered and conjured and cursed under their breath as they tried to put a government back together. But underneath the repairs, something was rotting quietly. Harry felt it in the way people looked away too quickly when he walked past. In the way some voices softened when they said, reform. In the way some staff flinched at the word equality, like it burned. The serpent's hand wasn't only outside, it was in the air. Hermione's operational draft grew into a binder thick enough to bruise someone. Harry sat across from her in a conference room, with the door locked and a silencing charm humming in the walls. It was past midnight. Percy had left hours ago, muttering about political catastrophes and 3 different committees, and if my mother finds out I'm involved in another secret plan, she'll actually murder me. Robards had gone to check on the surveillance teams. Kingsley was in his office preparing a public statement he planned to accidentally leak through the right channels. Now it was just Harry and Hermione, surrounded by maps and parchments and exhausted determination. Hermione pushed the binder toward him. "Read the rules of engagement section again," she said. Harry rubbed his eyes. "I've read it 3 times. "Then read it a 4th, Hermione said, and she sounded like she meant it. Harry sighed and opened the binder. Rule 1. Stunning curses prioritized. Rule 2. No unforgivables unless in immediate self-defense. Rule 3. Capture and containment above all else. Rule 4. All evidence to be preserved. Rule 5. No unauthorized pursuit. Harry stopped at Rule 5 and felt his jaw tighten. "I hate this one," he said. Hermione didn't even blink. "That's why it's in there." Harry leaned back. "What if someone runs?" "Then we stop them," Hermione said, voice steady. "But we do it with designated teams and perimeter control. We don't do it with you running into a forest alone like you're still 17 and immortal." Harry stared at her. Hermione stared back, unflinching. The anger in him eased, replaced by something heavier. The memory of how close he'd come to dying at Hogwarts, and how he'd only survived because someone had stepped in at the last second. He exhaled. "Fine," he said. "Fine. No solo heroics." Hermione's shoulders dropped slightly, relief slipping through her control. "Good," she said, "because if you die, I will personally hex your ghost." Harry almost smiled, but the humor didn't reach his eyes. "What about the location?" he asked. Hermione flipped to another section. A map rose into the air, hovering above the table. Hogwarts, drawn in thin lines of ink and magic. A section near the west wing glowed faintly. "This corridor," Hermione said. "It's been stabilized. Flitwick reinforced the structural spells. McGonagall approved it, reluctantly, as long as students aren't on the grounds." Harry's stomach tightened. "She knows." "Of course she knows," Hermione replied. "We can't do this without Hogwarts' cooperation, and we're not dragging her castle into another war behind her back." Harry nodded slowly. "And what's the bait?" he asked. Hermione's eyes sharpened. "We announce that a temporary ministry archive is being stored there for security," she said. "Specifically, records and property documentation tied to Muggle-born restitution claims." Harry felt something cold settle in his chest. That's exactly the kind of thing they've been targeting. "Yes," Hermione said. "They'll want to destroy it. They'll want to send a message that the new order is fragile." "And the leak?" Harry asked. Hermione tapped her quill against her teeth. "We feed the false detail through a restricted ministry memo," she said. "A specific date and time for the transfer. We make it look like an internal security report, and we watch who reacts." That doesn't guarantee the serpent's hand acts. It doesn't, Hermione agreed. But they're escalating. They need spectacle. They need a win. And if we offer them a target that looks like a perfect symbol, they'll take it. Harry stared at the glowing corridor on the map. It felt wrong to use Hogwarts again. It felt like betrayal, like they were turning the school into bait and hoping nothing snapped. But Hermione was right. A war you couldn't see didn't end by itself. "Who gets the memo?" Harry asked. Hermione's expression hardened. "Only people who should have access," she said. "Only those tied to security protocols, which narrows our leak pool." "Meaning," Harry said slowly. Hermione met his gaze. "Meaning Greenfield," she said. The name landed like a stone. Mortimer Greenfield, senior legal advisor, permanent civil servant, a man who'd approved discriminatory laws with neat signatures and cleaning for decades. A man whose position gave him access to everything. "And if he isn't the leak?" Harry asked. Hermione's voice was quiet. "Then someone close to him is," she said, "or someone else entirely. And this operation will reveal that too." Harry nodded, but unease clung to him. Because bait was dangerous. Because planning didn't guarantee survival. Because the serpent's hand had already proven it could strike without warning. The next morning, the memo was written. Not by Hermione, not by Kingsley, by Percy. Because Percy Weasley was the perfect combination of official, meticulous, and untrustworthy to the pure-blood faction. They would believe Percy's paperwork was real, because Percy's paperwork was always real. He placed it on Kingsley's desk, hands shaking slightly. "I cannot believe I'm doing this again," Percy muttered. Kingsley raised an eyebrow. "You survived the last war," he said. "You can survive the paperwork version of it." Percy glared. "This is worse," he said. "At least curses are honest." The memo was stamped, filed, and released through a controlled internal channel. Then they waited. Waiting was torture. Harry went through his day like a man moving through water. Briefings. Patrol assignments. Evidence processing from the latest bolt hole. Meetings where department heads argued about funding while people still died on the edges of society. Every hour, Hermione sent updates. No reaction yet. No unusual owl traffic. No change in Greenfield's schedule. By evening, Harry's nerves had stretched so tight he could taste metal. At midnight, Robards arrived at Harry's office, face grim. "Movement," he said. Harry was on his feet instantly. "Greenfield?" Roberts nodded. "He left the ministry 2 hours ago. Went home, then left again." Hermione stepped into the doorway behind Robards, already pulling on gloves. "Where?" "Leaky cauldron," Robards said. "Back room. Private booth." He met someone. Harry's heartbeat spiked. "Who?" Robards' expression tightened. "We didn't get a clear look," he admitted. "But we got something else." He slid a small slip of parchment onto the desk. A copy of an owl receipt. Destination, an anonymous public aviary. Sent. 1 hour ago. Contents. One sealed envelope. Hermione's eyes narrowed. "He sent an owl," she said. Harry's voice came out low. "To who?" Robards shook his head. "We don't know yet. But it was coded priority delivery. Expensive." Hermione and Harry exchanged a look. If Greenfield was the leak, this was it. If he wasn't, this was still damning. Because people didn't send expensive coded owls in the middle of the night unless they were afraid, excited, or guilty. Kingsley was summoned immediately. He arrived in a coat thrown over his robes, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. He took one look at the owl receipt and went still. "This is it," Hermione said quietly. Kingsley's jaw tightened. Or it's him realizing he's being watched, he said. Harry's stomach sank. He could warn them off. Kingsley's eyes hardened. Then we move the timeline up, he said. Hermione blinked. We can't, she said. We need the bait to be credible. We need the right conditions. Kingsley's gaze didn't soften. If he's warning them, we lose our chance, he said. We need to assume they now know a target exists, and they'll act sooner rather than later. Harry felt adrenaline surge. Robards nodded grimly. We can have teams deployed to Hogwarts within 2 hours, he said. Hermione's voice sharpened. We need McGonagall's approval, she said. We need Flitwick to reinforce wards. If we rush, and someone gets through, if we don't rush, someone dies somewhere else, Harry interrupted. Silence. Kingsley looked at Harry for a long moment. Then he nodded. We deploy, he said. Hermione's face tightened, but she nodded too, because Hermione always did what was necessary even when she hated it. They moved fast. The Ministry's deployment protocols had been rewritten after the war, streamlined for emergency response. Port keys were authorized. Hit wizards were notified. Medical teams were prepped. And in a quiet room on level 2, Harry watched his auras gear up. There were 22 of them tonight, not all veterans. Some were new recruits. Faces still too young, eyes still too hopeful. Harry hated that. He stepped forward. Listen, he said, voice carrying. Tonight we're not raiding a house full of Death Eaters. We're running a containment operation. We're setting a perimeter, securing a location, and waiting for a signal. A few people shifted. Waiting operations were harder than raids. Waiting gave fear too much room. Our objective is capture, Harry continued. Not revenge. The Serpent's Hand wants us to lose discipline. They want us to panic. They want us to look like tyrants. His eyes swept the room. We don't give them that. A murmur of agreement rippled back. Robart stepped in beside him, holding a folded map of Hogwarts. Hermione stood at the back, adjusting the strap of her wand holster, expression set. Kingsley entered last. He didn't wear minister robes tonight. He wore combat gear, the way he had during the war. Harry saw a few auras straighten automatically. Kingsley's voice was quiet, but solid. We're going to Hogwarts, he said. And we're going to end this string of attacks before it becomes a second war. He paused. And if we fail, he added, then we learn, we adapt, we try again. But we do not stop. Harry felt something in his chest tighten. Not fear this time, but resolve. They deployed at 3 a.m. Hogwarts in the dark was eerie. The castle loomed under a sky full of winter stars, snow dusting the towers. No students, no laughter, no noise. Just stone and memory. McGonagall met them at the entrance, robes drawn tight, eyes sharp with controlled fury. You are playing with my school, she said the moment Harry stepped out of the portkey. Harry didn't flinch. We're protecting it, he said. McGonagall's gaze cut to Kingsley, minister. Kingsley inclined his head respectfully. Headmistress, he said, thank you for allowing this. Allowing, McGonagall repeated, voice icy. As if I had a choice. As if the world ever gives Hogwarts a choice when it wants to make the castle into a battlefield. Hermione stepped forward. Students are safe, she said quickly. No one is on the grounds. We've sealed access. Flitwick's already reinforcing the corridor wards. McGonagall's eyes flicked to Hermione and softened just a fraction. I know, she said, and that is the only reason I am not hexing you. Harry almost exhaled in relief. Almost, because the castle felt wrong. Not broken. Not unstable. Wrong. As they walked through the corridor toward the west wing, Harry felt something like a pressure in the air, as if Hogwarts itself was listening. Portraits watched them pass, silent in their frames. Suits of armor stood too still. Even the torches felt dimmer. Hermione noticed too. Her gaze flicked around, wand ready. Flitwick waited at the corridor entrance, wand in hand, eyes bright with tension. Wards are reinforced, he said. Structural stability is acceptable. But the castle's magic is restless tonight. Harry's mouth went dry. Restless how? Flitwick hesitated, like it expects trouble, he said quietly. McGonagall's jaw tightened. It remembers, she said. They entered the corridor. It was empty. Cold. A section of wall had been repaired with new stone that didn't match perfectly, like a scar. At the far end, a heavy door had been installed. Behind it, in theory, sat the temporary archive they'd invented. In reality, there was nothing but a decoy trunk full of blank parchment and a traceable signature charm, designed to flare if anyone touched it. Robards spread teams into positions. 2 teams concealed behind tapestries. 1 at each end of the corridor hit wizards in the adjacent hallway, ready to breach. Hermione placed her palm against the wall and whispered a spell, her eyes closing as she listened for ward vibrations. Harry watched her face. Tight, she murmured. The wards are tight. Kingsley moved to stand beside Harry. Now we wait, he said. Harry nodded. Waiting at Hogwarts felt different than waiting outside a dark wizard hideout. It felt like sacrilege, like they were inviting something horrible back into a place that had only just begun to heal. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. The corridor remained silent. No footsteps, no voices, no sign of intrusion. Harry's muscles cramped from stillness. His mind ran in circles, imagining every possible failure. What if Greenfield had warned them not to come? What if the leak wasn't Greenfield, and the serpent's hand was striking somewhere else right now, while they sat here? What if this whole thing was their mistake, and they were about to pay for it with blood? Then, at 5:17 a.m., Hermione stiffened. Harry's head snapped toward her. She lifted her hand slowly, signaling silence. Harry held his breath. A vibration, not in the air. In the stone, a faint hum, like a ward being touched. Flitwick's eyes widened. They're probing, he whispered. Harry's pulse slammed in his ears. Robards tightened his grip on his wand. The hum came again, sharper this time. A testing spell. A careful search. Someone out there, invisible or disillusioned, trying to find the edge of their protections. Hermione's voice came out barely above breath. They're good, she whispered. Harry's mouth went dry. The corridor torches flickered. One suit of armor down the hall shifted as if it wanted to move. And then, very softly, from the far end of the corridor, there was a sound like a whisper against stone. A door handle turning. Harry raised his wand, every nerve alive. And in that split second, before the door opened, Hogwarts itself seemed to inhale, as if the castle knew something Harry didn't, as if it was bracing, because whatever was about to step into that corridor wasn't coming blind, it was coming prepared. The handle turned all the way down, slow enough to be deliberate. Not a nervous mistake, not someone stumbling into the wrong corridor. A choice. Harry didn't blink. He didn't breathe properly. His wand was steady in his hand, but inside his body everything was tightening, bracing, remembering the last time Hogwarts had been invaded, and how quickly a school could become a slaughterhouse. The door creaked open. Cold air spilled into the corridor, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and something sharper beneath it, like burnt metal after a curse. A figure stepped through, Disillusionment shimmered off them as they crossed the threshold. The outline sharpened, then resolved into a dark-cloaked witch with her hood up and her wand already raised. Behind her, two more shapes followed, then a fourth moving with controlled confidence. Not teenagers looking for thrill, not panicked remnants. Professionals. Harry heard Robard's quiet voice in the communication mirror, barely a vibration of sound. 4 confirmed. Her eyes tracked the intruders with an almost frightening stillness, like she was calculating 10 steps ahead, even while her heart hammered. Flitwick's wand trembled. McGonagall's expression was carved from stone. The first witch paused, scanning the corridor with a detection spell that crawled over the walls like invisible fingers. It slid past the tapestries, past the suits of armor, past the places where auras waited, disillusioned and silent. Harry felt the spell brush his own concealed presence, like a cold breath. Then the witch lowered her wand slightly. "Clear," she murmured. Harry's stomach dropped. She hadn't detected them. Or she had, and she wanted them to think she hadn't. The second figure stepped forward. A wizard this time, taller, broader, with a posture that reminded Harry unpleasantly of old Death Eaters, the confidence of someone who believed the world belonged to him and he was merely reclaiming it. He spoke softly. "This is it," he said. "The new archive." His voice carried arrogance and a strange delight, like the thrill of proving something. The third person stayed near the door, wand angled towards the entrance behind them, guarding retreat. The fourth moved like a shadow along the wall, hands gloved, as if ready to touch objects without leaving residue. Hermione's breath came out silent, lips barely moving. They brought a ward breaker. Harry's eyes flicked to her. She didn't look away from the intruders. "Which means," Harry murmured, barely making sound, "they expected protection." "Yes," Hermione whispered. "They're not testing anymore." The lead witch walked toward the heavy door at the end of the corridor. The decoy, her wand, traced a careful circle, and Harry felt the wards tighten, vibrating as they responded. Flitwick had reinforced them, layered them, made them strong enough to hold an angry giant, but ward strength didn't matter if the attackers knew how to unpick it. The ward breaker stepped forward, lifting his wand. He didn't speak a spell out loud. He tapped the air once, twice, 3 times, and the ward shimmered. Then it weakened. Harry's mouth went dry. Flitwick swallowed hard. "He's good," he whispered, horror and respect mingling in his tone. McGonagall's eyes narrowed. "Too good," she said quietly. As the ward faltered, the lead witch smiled under her hood. They expected this to be easy. They expected to walk into Hogwarts, steal something symbolic, burn it, and leave behind their message like a knife in the heart of the new world. Harry waited for Kingsley's signal, waited for the command that would unleash 22 auras and end this in a storm of red light. But Kingsley didn't move. Not yet. Harry glanced sideways. Kingsley stood perfectly still, eyes locked on the group, jaw clenched. He was waiting for one thing: confirmation that the leak was real, that the bait had traveled through the right channels. He needed proof before the arrest. Harry hated it, but Harry understood it. The ward collapsed. The heavy door swung inward. The lead witch stepped into the room beyond, followed by the ward breaker and the broad-shouldered wizard. The fourth person slipped in last, leaving the guard near the corridor entrance. Inside, the room was small, stone walls newly repaired, a decoy trunk sitting on a table beneath a lantern. The lead witch approached it with almost reverent satisfaction. "This is what they care about," she murmured. "This is their little paper shield." She reached out, fingers gloved, and touched the trunk. The trace charm Hermione had placed on it flared, not visible to them, visible to Harry, because Hermione had linked it to her wand. Hermione's wand warmed in her hand like a heartbeat. Touch confirmed, Hermione whispered. Kingsley lifted his wand. Now, he said, voice quiet and lethal. Harry moved. He dropped his disillusionment charm and stepped out from behind the tapestry like a blade being drawn. 21 auras materialized along the corridor in a ripple of sudden presence, wands raised. The guard at the door froze, surprise flashing under their hood. Harry pointed his wand at their chest. Ministry auras, he said, voice sharp enough to cut stone. Drop your wand. On the ground. Now. For a split second, the guard hesitated, and that hesitation was the only mercy they were going to get. Stupefy, Harry said. Red lights slammed into the guard, dropping them instantly. Roberts barked, containment positions. Auras surged forward, the corridor filled with controlled chaos, boots on stone, wands at the ready, voices clipped and professional. Inside the room, the serpent's hand reacted like people who had planned for resistance, not like amateurs. The broad-shouldered wizard spun, wand up, and without a word fired a curse into the corridor. Green, Harry's body moved before his mind finished processing. He threw up a shield charm, and the killing curse smashed into it like a hammer. The shield held for one terrifying heartbeat, then shattered. The green light ricocheted into the ceiling, blasting stone apart. Dust and chunks of masonry rained down. Flitwick flinched, then snapped his wand forward. Protego Maxima. A reinforced shield flared across the corridor like a transparent wall, absorbing the next volley. Hermione's voice cut through, sharp and furious. They're using unforgivables. Kingsley's voice was steady. Self-defense authorized. Capture priority. Harry didn't think. He moved. He charged into the room with Ron at his shoulder, and Hermione just behind, their old patterns snapping into place, as if the war had never ended. The lead witch turned toward them, hood slipping back. Harry saw a face he didn't recognize. Sharp cheekbones, eyes too bright, smile too certain, not a famous name. That was what made it worse, because it meant the ideology had grown new faces. You thought you could trap us, she said, and her voice was almost amused. In Hogwarts, no less. How sentimental. Hands up, Harry barked. Wands down. She laughed and lifted her wand. Hermione slammed a binding spell toward her, ropes flashing out. The witch slashed her wand sideways, cutting the ropes mid-air with vicious precision. The ward breaker moved toward a side wall, wand flicking. Harry's instincts screamed. He wasn't trying to fight. He was trying to leave. Harry lunged, firing a stunner. The ward breaker twisted, blocked it, then shoved his palm against the stone and whispered something under his breath. The wall shimmered. A hidden passage. A way out. Hermione saw it too. He's opening an escape route. Ron swore and fired a stunning curse at the broad-shouldered wizard. It hit him in the shoulder, staggering him, but he didn't go down. He snarled, shielded, and fired back. Red, not green this time. The curse slammed into Ron's shield, knocking him backward. Harry's pulse roared in his ears. This wasn't a simple arrest. This was a fight, and it was happening inside Hogwarts. Close the passage, Harry shouted. Flitwick raised his wand and screamed, Finite. The shimmer faltered. The ward breaker hissed, fury flashing in his eyes, and pushed harder, forcing the stone to shift again. Hermione made a decision. She didn't ask. She didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, eyes narrowed, and cast a spell Harry hadn't heard since the war. Diro, the stone beneath the wardbreaker's hand hardened instantly, sealing like iron. His eyes widened in shock as the passage locked mid-formation. He slammed his wand against the wall, trying to break it. Hermione followed, voice like ice. Petrificus totalus. The ward breaker froze, rigid, falling backward with a dull thud. One down. Harry's focus snapped to the lead witch. She was moving toward the corridor, trying to slip past them like smoke. Harry cut her off. Stupefy. She blocked. Harry fired again. Blocked again. She was fast. Too fast. She flung a curse at his legs, something heavy and binding, and Harry jumped, barely clearing it. The curse splashed against the stone behind him, leaving black scorch marks that sizzled. Hogwarts reacted. The torches flared brighter as if the castle itself was angry. The air thickened. Harry felt the familiar pressure of old wards awakening, responding to violence like a sleeping beast being shaken. McGonagall's voice thundered from the corridor. In my school, a blast of transfiguration magic rippled through the doorway. The table with the decoy trunk twisted, reshaped, and became a mass of iron chains that snapped outward, aiming for the lead witch. The witch dodged, barely, chains grazing her cloak. Her eyes flicked toward McGonagall with something like genuine fear. Good, Harry thought grimly. Fear her. Fear the castle. Fear the consequences. Because they hadn't just walked into a ministry trap. They'd walked into Hogwarts, defended by someone who had never lost a battle in her own halls. The broad-shouldered wizard roared and threw a curse toward McGonagall. Hermione reacted instantly, shield snapping up. The curse slammed into it, sending Hermione sliding backwards. Harry's stomach clenched. Enough, Kingsley said, voice low. He stepped into the doorway, and for a moment, Harry saw the Auror Kingsley had been for 20 years, calm, lethal, impossible to intimidate. Kingsley lifted his wand. Expelliarmus. The lead witch's wand flew out of her hand. Before she could reach for it, Kingsley flicked his wand again. Incarcerus. Ropes snapped around her arms and torso, binding her tightly. She hit the floor hard, snarling like a trapped animal. The broad-shouldered wizard tried to run. Robards was faster. He slammed a stunner into the man's back. The wizard crashed to the stone, unconscious. Silence fell. Not complete silence. Not peaceful. But the sudden quiet that comes after violence, when everyone is holding their breath, checking if there's another curse coming, if the floor is about to collapse, if the castle is about to scream. Harry stood over the captured witch, wand pointed down, chest heaving. Her hood had fallen fully back now, revealing dark hair pulled into a tight braid and eyes full of burning certainty. She looked up at Harry, and she smiled. You really thought this was the whole hand, she said softly. Harry's blood went cold. Hermione stepped closer, wand steady, face pale. What did you say? The witch's smile widened slightly. This was a finger, she murmured. A test, a message. Kingsley's expression didn't change. But Harry saw his eyes sharpen. A message to who? Kingsley asked quietly. The witch's gaze slid past him to the corridor beyond, as if she could see through stone. To your leak, she said. To your ministry. To your precious new world. Harry's mouth went dry. Greenfield, he said. The witch laughed, low. You're still thinking of names, she whispered. Still thinking you can solve this like a case file, like it's about one man passing notes. Her eyes glittered. It's not, she said. It's about rot. The torches flickered. The castle groaned somewhere deep in its bones, a sound like a living thing in pain. Harry felt Hermione stiffen beside him. And then, from the corridor outside the room, a shout rang out. Head Auror, Minister. An Auror sprinted up, face white with urgency. We've got another breach. Harry's head snapped up. Where? The Auror swallowed hard. Not here, he said, in the ministry. Harry felt the floor drop out from under him. Kingsley's eyes narrowed. Explain. The Aurora's voice shook. "There's been an explosion on level 2, he said. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement. They hit the records wing. They left the symbol." Hermione's face went pale. Harry's heartbeat turned to ice. This had been a diversion, not a full strike. A split. A way to pull their best people away from the Ministry, so something else could slip through. The captured witch smiled from the floor, pleased. "You see," she whispered. "You can't be everywhere. You can't stop it all." Harry's grip on his wand tightened until his knuckles ached. Kingsley turned, eyes burning with controlled fury. "Secure these prisoners," he snapped to Robards. "Transport immediately. Full evidence sweep. McGonagall, Flitwick, lock this wing down." He looked at Harry. "Potter," he said, voice hard. "With me, now." Harry nodded, adrenaline surging again. They'd won the fight in Hogwarts, but the Serpent's Hand had just shown them something far worse. They could attack in 2 places at once, and that meant the war they thought they were preventing had already started. The portkey dropped them into the Ministry atrium with a crack like a bone snapping. Harry staggered half a step, heart hammering, and the first thing he noticed wasn't the smoke or the shouting. It was the sound. The Ministry was never quiet, even after the war. There was always the murmur of paperwork and footsteps, and enchanted lifts complaining in their nasal voices. Now, over everything, there was a high, thin ringing, like the building itself was stunned. Witches and wizards ran across the golden tiles, some clutching bandaged arms, others dragging people away from the lifts. The enchanted ceiling above them flickered between storm clouds and the sick green of curse residue. Kingsley was already moving. "Level 2, he barked. "Now." Harry ran beside him, boots slipping slightly on soot-dusted tiles. Ron and Hermione weren't here, still at Hogwarts securing prisoners, ensuring the castle wasn't compromised further. That left Harry and Kingsley and whoever was still alive down here to hold the center. They reached the lift. The golden grille was jammed half open, warped by heat. Someone had blasted it, but not enough to destroy it completely. "Stairs," Kingsley snapped. They took them 2 at a time. The air grew sharper the lower they went, thick with the taste of burnt parchment and a darker scent Harry hated. The smell of spells that were meant to hurt people, not fix things. Level 2 was chaos. The corridor that usually bustled with auras had been ripped apart. One entire wall was gone, blown outward into twisted debris. Glass from office windows littered the floor like ice. Desks had been overturned. Filing cabinets lay crumpled, their contents scattered in damp piles, where burst pipes had poured water over the wreckage. Harry's stomach clenched. This wasn't random destruction. It was targeted. Roberts met them halfway down the corridor, face streaked with soot, hair wild, one sleeve torn. "Minister?" he said, voice tight. They hit the records wing. Harry pushed past him to see. The records wing door was gone. The room beyond was open to the corridor, exposed like a wound. Inside, everything that had once been neat and ordered was now blackened ruin. Parchment floated in the air, half-burned, drifting like dead leaves. The smell was worse inside, ash and ink, and something biting, like dark magic had clung to the paper itself. A group of clerks stood huddled near the far wall, shaking, eyes wide. A healer from St. Mungo's knelt beside someone on the ground, murmuring spells in a frantic voice. Harry's throat tightened. "Casualties?" Robards' jaw worked. "No dead," he said. "Not this time. 3 injured, 1 serious." Harry felt a fraction of relief. Then it turned into anger so sharp it made his vision blur. They'd done this on purpose. Minimal casualties so the Ministry couldn't rally the public with blood. Maximum damage to structure so the work became harder, slower, demoralizing. Kingsley stepped into the records room, boots crunching on glass. His eyes swept across the devastation, then landed on the back wall. The symbol was there, black paint, 3 feet tall. The serpent's hand. Under it, a new message: not the phoenix cannot burn forever. Something worse. Your laws are paper. Our will is fire. Harry stared at it, and for a moment he felt the old panic from the war days, the sense of being hunted by something that didn't care about rules, only outcomes. Kingsley's voice came out quiet. Who found it first? A clerk lifted a trembling hand. I did, she whispered. I came in early. I thought it was a burst pipe at first. Then I saw the smoke. Kingsley's gaze softened slightly. You did the right thing, he said. You got people out. That matters. The clerk nodded, tears spilling down her face. Harry turned in a slow circle, forcing his mind to work. Show me exactly what was destroyed, he said to Robards. Robards gestured at a section of shelving that had been reduced to scorched fragments. These cabinets, he said, all of them. Records on Ministry internal security procedures. Harry felt his blood turn cold. Not random, he murmured. Robards nodded grimly. They went straight for it. Kingsley's jaw tightened. They're erasing trails. Harry's mind raced. Or they're removing something that incriminates someone, he said. Kingsley looked at him sharply. Harry kept going because once the thought formed, it wouldn't let go. They knew where to hit, he said. They knew exactly which section would cripple us. That means inside knowledge, which means the leak isn't just passing information out, he swallowed. It could be the attackers themselves, Harry said. Someone with access who physically walked them in. Robards' face went darker. We've had tokens missing, he said, but we also have keys, ward signatures, clearance levels. Harry's eyes snapped up. Ward signatures, he repeated. Hermione had said earlier that the coded ledger looked like ministry payroll. Harry had assumed it meant someone trained in accounting. But what if it meant someone was inside the system, using it? Kingsley turned to a nearby Auror, one of the old guard, and his voice sharpened. Lock down level 2, he ordered. No one in or out without my authorization. Get me a list of every person who entered this level in the last 48 hours. Tokens, flu logs, portkey registration. Everything. The Aurora nodded and ran. Robards leaned closer to Harry, voice low. They chose the timing well, he said. Most of our best teams were deployed to Hogwarts. Harry's stomach twisted, because he'd already realized that. The raid at Hogwarts had been real. But it had also been bait for them. They'd forced the Ministry to choose where to defend, and the Serpent's hand had proved they could still strike the place that mattered most. Kingsley stared at the blackened wall, and something about him changed, not into anger, into focus. This is the moment, he said quietly. Harry turned toward him. What do you mean? Kingsley looked at the symbol again. They want to show the world we're weak, he said. They want people to believe reform is impossible because we can't even keep our own house secure. Harry's throat tightened. And they just proved it. Kingsley shook his head once. No, he said. They proved we were unprepared. That's different. He turned and looked directly at Harry. And now, he said, we stop playing defense. Harry felt a jolt. How? Kingsley's eyes were hard. We go public, he said. Robards swore under his breath. Minister, if we hide it, Kingsley cut in, we feed their narrative anyway. People will hear rumors. They will exaggerate. They will invent conspiracies. They will panic. He took a breath. But if we announce it ourselves, he continued, we control the story. We show that the serpent's hand exists. Yes, we show they're dangerous, yes. And then we show we're responding with law and strength. Harry stared. You think the Wizengamot will back reforms after an attack on the ministry? Kingsley's mouth twisted. They don't have a choice, he said. Not if they want to keep their seats. Not if they want to pretend they're loyal to Britain. Robards' voice was grim. They'll twist it, he warned. They'll claim it proves Muggle-born reforms caused instability. Kingsley's gaze didn't flinch. Then we show them the evidence, he said. We show that the serpent's hand was already operating before reforms. We show it's funded by the same pure-blood ideology that poisoned the ministry for 50 years. Harry felt cold clarity settle in. We use the prisoners from Hogwarts, he said. Kingsley nodded. Exactly, he said. We have captured terrorists inside Hogwarts itself. We have evidence. We have plans they were carrying. We have testimony. We have the symbol now painted on our own walls. He looked around the destroyed room. This is not a reason to slow down, he said. This is a reason to accelerate. Harry's mind jumped to Hermione's legislation drafts, to her education reforms, to the magical equality act she'd been building like a weapon made of words. They're trying to burn the paperwork, Harry said slowly. Kingsley's voice came out like steel. Then we carve it into law, so deeply they can't burn it out. A shout echoed from the corridor. An Auror ran in, face pale. Minister, he said. We caught someone. Kingsley's eyes narrowed. Who? The Auror swallowed hard. Mortimer Greenfield, he said. He tried to leave level 2 when the lockdown went into effect. He said he had urgent business, but his token signature matches one of the missing ward clearances. Harry felt the room tilt. Kingsley's face went utterly still. Bring him, he said. They brought Greenfield in between two auras. He looked smaller than Harry expected. Thin, grey-haired. Neat even now, robes brushed as if he'd dressed carefully, as if presentation could protect him. His eyes flicked over the destroyed room, then to Kingsley, then to Harry. Minister, he said, voice calm, what is the meaning of this? Kingsley didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer until he was within arm's length of Greenfield, and the air seemed to tighten around them. The meaning, Kingsley said quietly, is that I am tired of rot hiding behind bureaucracy. Greenfield's expression flickered. If you're suggesting... I'm not suggesting, Kingsley interrupted. I'm asking you one question, and your answer will determine what happens next. Greenfield swallowed once. Kingsley held up the owl receipt. You sent this, Kingsley said, at 1 a.m. Greenfield's eyes darted to it, then away. It is not illegal to send private correspondence, he said quickly. Harry's voice came out low. It is, if it's correspondence to terrorists, he said. Greenfield's gaze snapped to him. Mr. Potter, he said, with a faint edge of contempt, you are barely out of school. I will not be interrogated by... Kingsley's wand snapped up. Not to attack, just to silence. Enough, Kingsley said. Greenfield went still. Kingsley's voice was cold. This morning, he said, someone attacked the ministry and destroyed internal security records. That is an act of terrorism. We have evidence that someone with inside access facilitated it. Greenfield's lips tightened. If you think Your token signature matches a missing ward clearance, he said. Your owl receipt shows you contacted an anonymous aviary shortly before the attack. And your legislative approvals show decades of deliberate discrimination. Greenfield's composure cracked for the first time. Not fear, anger. You're building a case out of politics, he snapped. Out of ideology. Hermione's voice came from the doorway. Harry's head snapped toward it. She stood there, hair wind-blown, cheeks red from portkey travel, eyes fierce, Ron was behind her, jaw clenched, wand in hand. They'd come straight from Hogwarts. Hermione stepped into the room. "This isn't politics," she said. "It's a pattern." Greenfield's eyes narrowed. "Miss Granger," he said, voice dripping disdain. "How charming." The mud, his mouth stopped. Not because he chose to stop, because Hermione had lifted her wand and cast a simple, precise silencing charm. Greenfield's lips moved, but no sound came out. Hermione's voice was dangerously calm. "You will not speak that word in this ministry," she said. Kingsley's gaze flicked to Hermione, then to Greenfield. "Remove the silencing charm," Kingsley said. Hermione hesitated for half a second, then flicked her wand. Greenfield's voice returned, and with it his control. He straightened his robes, as if reclaiming dignity. Kingsley didn't give him time. "We are going to search your office," Kingsley said. "Your home, your owl logs, your financial records, everything." Greenfield's face went pale. "You can't," he said. "I have protections." Kingsley's eyes were ice. "We can," he said. "National security." Greenfield's voice rose. "The Wizengamot will not allow this," he snapped. "You will destroy public trust." Hermione's laugh was short and bitter. "Public trust," she said. "You mean the trust that let you hide discriminatory laws and amendments for 25 years? Greenfield's eyes flashed. "Those laws protected wizarding culture," he hissed. Harry felt something cold and furious settle in his chest. "You're the rot," Harry said quietly. Greenfield's gaze snapped to him, and for a moment his mask slipped. For a moment Harry saw it. The belief, the contempt, the certainty that some people were born to rule, and others were born to serve. Then Greenfield's composure returned. "You're children," he said, "playing at government, and you will learn what every idealist learns eventually. The world does not bend because you want it to." Kingsley leaned in, voice low. "It bends when we force it," he said. Greenfield's eyes widened slightly. Kingsley straightened and turned to the Aurors. "Detain him," he ordered. "Holding cells. No contact. No owls. No visitors." The Aurors grabbed Greenfield's arms. Greenfield struggled, composure breaking into panic now. "Minister," he snapped, "you're making a mistake." Kingsley didn't look at him. "I've made plenty," he said. "This isn't one." Greenfield was dragged out of the room, still protesting, voice fading down the corridor. Harry's chest heaved as if he'd been holding his breath for hours. Hermione stepped closer, eyes scanning the burned shelves. "This is what he was afraid of," she said quietly. "Not being arrested, being exposed." Ron's voice was tight. "You think he's the leak?" Hermione's gaze hardened. "I think he's part of it," she said. "And I think he's not alone." Kingsley turned toward the symbol on the wall again. "We've cut one head," he said. "Now we find the rest." Harry stared at the destruction and felt the shape of the next fight forming. Not in forests, not in castles, in paperwork, in vaults, in committees, in schools, in mines. And somewhere out there, the serpent's hand was already moving, reacting, adapting, preparing the next strike. Harry's wand felt heavy in his hand, but his resolve felt heavier. Because now the war wasn't about saving the world from Voldemort. It was about saving it from what people like Greenfield had built quietly for decades. Kingsley spoke again, voice firm. "We convene the Wizengamot," he said. "Tomorrow. We present evidence from Hogwarts. We present the Ministry attack. We present Greenfield. And we pass the reforms while the smoke is still in the air." Hermione nodded once, eyes burning. Ron exhaled shakily. "And if they vote against it?" he asked. Kingsley's gaze didn't waver. Then, he said, they publicly choose to stand with terrorists. Harry looked at the symbol on the wall again. Your laws are paper. Our will is fire. He felt something fierce rise in him. Then we prove, Harry said quietly, that law can be stronger than fire. And for the first time in weeks, the fear in him didn't feel like a weight dragging him down. It felt like fuel. By dawn, the ministry smelled like scrubbed ash and stubbornness. Workers had already begun clearing the wreckage on level 2. Charms repaired what could be repaired. Buckets of soot vanished into conjured voids. Glass reformed into windows with a shimmer that looked almost hopeful if you didn't stare too long. Harry watched it all from the corridor outside Kingsley's office, arms folded tight, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He didn't feel relieved. He felt hunted. Because the serpent's hand had done exactly what it wanted. Proved they could touch the ministry whenever they chose, and proved the war wasn't over just because Voldemort was dead. Hermione stood beside him, pale and fierce, clutching a binder that had grown even thicker since the previous night. Ron paced near the lifts, running a hand through his hair in the same agitated loop, like motion might keep his anger from exploding. Kingsley's office door opened, and Percy emerged looking like someone who'd aged 10 years in 12 hours. They're assembling, Percy said, voice flat. Wizengamot Chamber. Full attendance requested. Hermione's eyes narrowed. Requested, she repeated. Percy gave a humorless smile. Ordered, essentially, he said, but we're pretending we live in a polite society. Ron muttered something that sounded like it would make Molly Weasley faint. Harry didn't speak. He was thinking about Greenfield. Greenfield had been a node, a gatekeeper, a quiet hand that steered laws the way a skilled wizard steered a curse. Subtle, controlled, devastating in long-term effect. But Greenfield had also been too calm when the ministry attacked. Too prepared, too sure that even if he was caught, the structure would protect him. That wasn't the confidence of a man acting alone. That was the confidence of someone who believed he was part of something larger. Hermione seemed to sense the same thought, because she leaned in and murmured, even if he did it, he didn't do it alone. Harry nodded once. Percy swallowed. They're also demanding to know why auras were deployed to Hogwarts without full committee oversight, he said. There are comments about overreach. Kingsley appeared behind him, already wearing formal minister robes, already composed into the shape of leadership. Only his eyes gave him away. They were too sharp, too tired, too angry. Let them comment, Kingsley said quietly. Today we're not asking for permission to defend people. We're showing them what happens when we don't. He glanced at Harry. Are you ready? Kingsley asked. Harry's throat tightened. Ready wasn't the word. But he nodded anyway. They walked. The Wizengamot chamber still carried old echoes. It was a circular room, tiered seating, rising like a stone amphitheater. In the center stood the floor where trials were held, where sentences were handed down, where people had been condemned by men who wore tradition like armor. Harry remembered standing there in 5th year, terrified, accused of lying, watched by faces that looked at him like he was an inconvenience. Now, as he stepped into the chamber, the room went very quiet. Not respectful quiet, calculating quiet. Eyes tracked him. Eyes tracked Kingsley. A few heads turned away when they met Harry's gaze, as if they didn't want to be seen looking at him too closely. Some of the old families were here. Parkinson, Bulstrode, Selwyn. Greengrass sat with perfect posture, unreadable. And there, near the front, sat Lucius Malfoy. He looked composed, pale, and entirely aware that every person in this chamber was measuring how far his influence still reached. Harry's stomach tightened. Deals had helped rebuild the world, but deals also left stains, the chamber clerk announced, voice echoing, "The Wizengamot is now in session." A gavel struck stone. The chief warlock's chair was occupied by an interim official, an older witch with iron-grey hair, who had survived the war by being cautious and silent. Harry didn't trust her, but he didn't need to. Kingsley stepped into the center of the floor. He didn't begin with greetings. He didn't begin with formalities. He began with fire. At 3:14 this morning, Kingsley said, voice carrying through the chamber, the Ministry of Magic was attacked. A wave of murmurs spread. Kingsley raised his wand. An image appeared above him, the destroyed records wing on level 2. Smoke, broken glass, scorched files. He didn't let them talk. At 5:17 this morning, he continued, an extremist group calling itself the Serpent's Hand infiltrated Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. This time, the room reacted visibly. Hogwarts wasn't just a school. It was a symbol. Pure bloods shifted, suddenly alert. Moderates leaned forward, uneasy. Some looked outraged. But Harry saw the fear beneath it. Fear that their children's castle had been violated again. Kingsley raised his wand again. Another image. The corridor in Hogwarts, the broken ward shimmer, the decoy trunk, the captured witch bound in ropes, her eyes bright with fanatic belief. This group has murdered 11 citizens in the last 3 months, Kingsley said. Journalists, civil servants, shopkeepers, healers. They have attacked Diagon Alley. They have attacked ministry facilities, and they have left messages promising the return of what they call the old order. He flicked his wand. The black symbol appeared above them, floating in the air like a threat. Your laws are paper. Our will is fire. The chamber went cold, not magically, emotionally. Harry watched faces change. Not because they suddenly cared about muggle-born rights or equality or any abstract principle, but because a threat had stepped into their world and made itself personal. Kingsley spoke again, voice lower now, almost conversational. They want you to believe reform caused this, he said. They want you to believe equality is instability. They want you to retreat into the safety of tradition and let them rule through fear. He paused. That is a lie, Kingsley said. This ideology existed long before our reforms. It existed in your laws, in your loopholes, in your silence, in your comfortable abstentions when votes were taken and people's lives were decided. Hermione's fingers tightened around her binder. Harry felt his heartbeat slow, focus sharpening. Now they were in the real battle. Not spells, words. Kingsley's eyes swept the chamber. And today, he continued, I'm not asking you to approve reform because it's morally right. A few people bristled at that. Kingsley didn't care. I'm telling you, he said, that if you do not approve reform now, you will be approving terrorism. The chamber erupted. Voices rose. Shouts, protests, outrage. The interim chief warlock hammered her gavel, but it barely cut through. Order, she snapped. Minister Shacklebolt, you cannot. Kingsley raised his wand. A silencing charm spread across the chamber like a wave. Not absolute, but enough to force the shouting into muffled frustration. Now only Kingsley's voice carried clearly. You will listen, Kingsley said, and he sounded like an Auror again, someone used to commanding rooms that didn't want to obey. He turned slightly. Deputy Head Auror Granger, Kingsley said. Present the evidence. Hermione stepped forward. The chamber quieted again, this time because Hermione Granger had a reputation now. And it wasn't only for brilliance. It was for relentless, terrifying competence. She lifted her wand. A web of names and lines appeared above the chamber. The same chart she'd once shown in a closed meeting, now revealed to everyone. Votes, dates, legislation, abstentions, a pattern of quiet collaboration. This, Hermione said, voice steady, is 50 years of legislative manipulation. Gasps rippled. A few people scoffed, but the scoffs were thin, defensive. Hermione's eyes sharpened. These laws were passed with language designed to sound neutral while targeting specific groups, she said. Muggleborns, werewolves, half-bloods, anyone outside established lineage. She flicked her wand. A page of legal text appeared, highlighted in glowing ink. Clause 17, subsection 4, paragraph 3. Property restrictions, employment barriers, marriage registries. Hermione's voice hardened. These were not accidents, she said. These were choices. She turned slightly, and Harry felt the chamber's attention shift. Because Hermione had been careful up until now, she'd shown the pattern. Now, she was going to show the name. Mortimer Greenfield, Hermione said. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement's senior legal advisor approved these amendments repeatedly. The name sparked a reaction. Some faces showed recognition. Some showed sudden fear, like they realized how deep the rot went. Hermione continued. This morning, after the Ministry attack, Greenfield attempted to flee Level 2 during lockdown. His token signature matches missing ward clearances used to bypass Ministry security. A wave of whispers erupted again, but this time it wasn't outrage. It was shock. Lucius Malfoy leaned back in his seat, expression unreadable. Greengrass's eyes narrowed, calculating. The Parkinsons exchanged glances that looked like panic. The interim chief warlock spoke, voice strained. Are you accusing a permanent civil servant of terrorism? Hermione met her gaze without flinching. I am stating, Hermione said, that the evidence warrants immediate detention and full investigation. And I am stating that the system that protected him for decades is the same system the Serpent's Hand is trying to preserve. Kingsley stepped forward again. Today, he said, you will vote on 3 measures. He raised a hand. 1, he said, the Magical Equality Act, comprehensive legislation overriding discriminatory law and establishing an independent review board. He raised a second finger. 2, he said, the Education Integration Charter, mandatory curriculum updates at Hogwarts and cultural exchange programs designed to break the cycle that breeds supremacist ideology. He raised a third finger. And 3, Kingsley said, the Ministry Security Reconstruction Order, internal audits, token reissuance, ward reconfiguration, and emergency authority to dismantle infiltrated departments. The chamber was silent now, not because they were calm, because they were cornered. Harry watched it happen. The pure-blood faction wanted to oppose him. They always did. But opposing him now meant standing up in a chamber with the Serpent's Hand symbol floating above everyone's heads and saying loudly that they were against actions designed to stop terrorists. They could still do it. They were arrogant enough, but arrogance didn't protect you when fear was in the room. A voice rose from the tiers. Minister, said a witch in emerald robes. This is emotional manipulation. Kingsley didn't even blink. It is reality, he said. Another voice, male, older. You are using fear to force through legislation. Kingsley's jaw tightened. They are using fear to murder people, he replied. I'm using law to stop them. The interim chief warlock raised her gavel. We will proceed to vote, she said, voice tight. Harry's pulse hammered as glowing quills flew to parchment. Votes were cast. The room breathed. Seconds felt like hours. Harry's eyes flicked to Lucius Malfoy. Malfoy sat perfectly still, hands clasped, gaze forward. Then slowly he lifted his quill and marked his vote. Yes. Harry's stomach twisted. Not because he trusted Malfoy, because the sight of Malfoy voting for equality felt like seeing a glacier move. It meant something had shifted, whether out of fear, calculation, or genuine change. The results were tallied. The clerk announced, voice echoing, "The Magical Equality Act passes." A stunned silence, then murmurs, then louder murmurs. Hermione's hand trembled slightly at her side. Harry saw it and felt something fierce and protective swell in him. Because she'd done it. She'd dragged decades of rot into the light and forced the world to look. The Education Integration Charter passes. This one hit Hogwarts, hit families, hit tradition. Some faces tightened, but fear still held them. The Ministry Security Reconstruction Order passes. Kingsley exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath since the war ended. For a moment, the chamber didn't know what to do. The pure-blood faction looked as if they'd swallowed something sour. Moderates looked relieved and ashamed. People who had spent decades benefiting from the system looked panicked, like their comfortable world was starting to crack. Kingsley lifted his hand. Silence returned. "This," Kingsley said, "is not the end." His voice carried no celebration, only warning. "The serpent's hand will react," he said. "They will call this tyranny. They will call this persecution. They will try to recruit your children with stories about lost glory and stolen heritage. They will tell them the old order was pure and the new order is chaos." He looked around the chamber. "And some of you," Kingsley added, "will secretly want to believe them, because it's easier than admitting the old order was built on cruelty." Harry felt the words land like stones. Kingsley continued, "But today you chose something else." He paused. "You chose law," Kingsley said. "You chose structure. You chose the hard work of building a world where blood doesn't decide worth." He turned slightly toward Hermione. "And you chose to stop hiding," he added. Kingsley stepped back. The interim chief warlock banged her gavel again, voice strained. Session adjourned. The chamber erupted into movement. People surged toward exits, whispering furiously, already plotting their next steps. Harry didn't move. He stood there on the central floor, staring at the symbols still floating above them. "Your laws are paper. Our will is fire." Hermione lifted her wand and made it vanish. She looked exhausted, victorious, terrified. All at once, Ron stepped close, voice low. "We actually did it," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. Hermione's laugh was shaky. "We passed laws," she said. "That's not the same as winning." Harry met her eyes. "No," he said. "But it's a start." Kingsley approached them, his expression grim. "Greenfield," he said quietly. Hermione's face tightened. "What about him?" Kingsley's gaze held something unpleasant. "He's not talking," he said. "And he's demanding a full Wizengamot review of his detention." Ron swore softly. Harry felt cold anger flare. "Let him demand," Harry said. Kingsley shook his head. "We will," he said. "But that's not the problem." Harry's throat tightened. "Then what is?" Kingsley's eyes hardened. "Someone tried to break him out," Kingsley said. Silence. Hermione went still. "What?" "10 minutes ago," he said. "Holding cells. A ward disruption attempt. Not successful. But it wasn't an amateur. It was precise." Harry felt his blood turn to ice. Because if someone was trying to break out Greenfield right now, it meant one thing. The serpent's hand cared about him, which meant he mattered. Which meant the leak was deeper than they'd thought. Hermione whispered, "They're protecting their asset." Kingsley nodded once. "They're not done," Kingsley said. Harry's hand drifted to his wand. He didn't even notice he was doing it. Ron's voice came out tight. "So, what now?" Kingsley looked at them, the three of them, young, exhausted, already carrying more than anyone should, and his voice softened just enough to remind Harry why he trusted him. Now, Kingsley said, we hold the line. Hermione's eyes flashed. And we hunt, she added. Harry's heartbeat steadied, because this was the work. Not just raids, not just speeches. Holding the line when the world tried to break, they left the chamber and walked into the ministry corridors that suddenly felt too open, too vulnerable. When they reached level 2, the records wing was still smoldering in places. Healers moved quietly. Clerks tried to salvage parchments that had survived. Harry watched a young witch pick up a half-burned file and begin sorting it into a pile labeled salvageable. Her hands were shaking, but she was still working. Harry stopped beside her. She looked up, startled, then flushed. Head Auror, she whispered. Harry's voice came out quiet. What's your name? She blinked. Mara, she said. Mara Wilkes, records clerk. Harry felt a faint jolt at the surname. Wilkes had been a Death Eater family once. Old blood, old rot. Mara saw something in his face and stiffened, fear flickering. Harry didn't let it grow. Thank you, he said simply. Mara blinked again. For what? For not running, Harry said. For coming back in here and sorting paper while people try to burn the world down. Mara's eyes filled, but she nodded, swallowing hard. Someone has to, she whispered. Harry nodded back. Someone has to. That phrase followed him like a spell. That night, after the Wizengamot session, after the lockdowns and briefings and new security protocols, Harry found himself at Grimmauld Place again. The house was quieter than usual, not peaceful, just muted, like it was holding its breath. Creature appeared as soon as they stepped inside, eyes bright with fierce satisfaction. You made the old snakes hiss today, Creature said proudly. Good, about time. Ron, exhausted beyond language, managed a weak grin. Thanks, Creature, he muttered. Hermione barely sat before pulling parchment from her bag again. Harry watched her, a familiar ache in his chest. You're going to keep working, he said. Hermione didn't look up. Yes, Ron groaned. Can we at least pretend we're going to sleep first? Hermione's quill paused. She looked up, eyes tired. Then she surprised them. She set the parchment down. Fine, she said. 1 hour. Who are you, and what have you done with Hermione Granger? Hermione's mouth twitched. I'm learning, she said quietly. If we burn ourselves out, we lose. Harry felt a soft relief loosen something in him. They ate in exhausted silence, tea, bread. Whatever Creature had insisted was proper nourishment. And then, when Ron finally dozed off on the sofa and Hermione leaned back, eyes half closed, Harry found himself staring at the darkened hallway. He could almost hear the castle again, Hogwarts breathing, remembering. He could almost hear the whispers of the serpent's hand, the promise that this would never end. But he also remembered something else. He remembered the great hall filled with students clapping for new first years. He remembered laughter returning in Hogsmeade. He remembered the way people had looked today when the laws passed. Fearful, yes, but forced to accept the direction of history. He turned his gaze to Hermione. Do you think it's enough? He asked quietly. Hermione opened her eyes fully. No, she said. It's not enough. Harry swallowed. Hermione continued, voice low and steady. But it's real, she said, and it's more than we had yesterday. Harry nodded slowly. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere in London, people slept, unaware of how close they'd come to another spiral into darkness. Somewhere else, someone was angry. Someone was gathering new followers with old poison. Harry could feel it like a storm just beyond the horizon. He stood. Hermione watched him. Where are you going? Harry's voice came out quiet. To check the wards, he said. just in case. Hermione didn't argue. She understood. He walked the corridor of Grimmauld Place, wand in hand, listening to the old house creak and settle. At the front door, he placed his palm on the wood and whispered, the ward check spells Kingsley had taught him after the first Ministry attack. The wards hummed back, strong, intact. For now, Harry exhaled. And in that moment, as his breath fogged faintly in the cold entryway, he realized something that made his chest tighten with both dread and determination. The war would never be one final battle again. Not like it had been with Voldemort. It would be 100 smaller battles. Some fought with wands, some fought with laws, some fought with teaching children not to hate. Some fought with refusing to look away when evil wore polite robes and spoke in legal language. He returned to the sitting room. Ron snored softly, face slack with exhaustion. Hermione sat watching the fire, eyes distant. Harry lowered himself into a chair, wand still in his hand. Hermione's voice came out barely above a whisper. They're going to hit back. Harry nodded. I know. Hermione's gaze lifted to him. And you're still going to teach, she said, after all of this. Harry felt something steady in his chest. Yes, he said, because if we don't teach the next generation differently, none of this matters. Hermione's eyes softened slightly. Good, she murmured. Outside, the rain continued. Somewhere in the Ministry, new wards were being laid. Somewhere in Hogwarts, portraits would whisper about what happened in the corridor, spreading the story through frames and castle gossip. And somewhere, hidden behind false names and old vaults, the serpent's hand would decide how to respond to the day the world refused to bend backward. Harry didn't know what their next move would be, but he knew what his would be. He'd keep showing up. He'd keep fighting, not for glory, not for titles, not because he wanted to be the hero, but because someone had to stand between the world and the fire. And this time he wasn't standing alone.